Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Deans.
Just make sure we have a quorum and then we'll get started. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order for April 26, 2021. I'd like to start this meeting by recognizing that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. We also recognize and respect the cultural diversity that First Nations, Inuit and Métis people bring to the City of Ottawa. We are currently broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. Given this meeting is being held electronically, I want to caution that there is a possibility of technical difficulties. Should we receive any disruptions, I would ask that everyone remain patient as we work to fix the issues and resume the meeting as soon as possible. Also, we received a request for the closed captioning feature in Zoom to be turned on. We have since enabled this feature for this meeting. However, we do not have any control over the accuracy, so I just wanted to provide a caution around that. In terms of meeting decorum, as each item is presented, I will ask board members if the item is received or carried. If you are joining without video, please say your name before speaking. If you are joining the meeting from a location with background noise, please keep yourself muted until it is your turn to speak. I'd also like to remind everyone to mute their notifications and alerts to avoid any disruptions in the meeting. Following the public meeting, we will have our in-camera meeting. At the February board meeting, I had announced the board was changing its start time on a trial basis to better accommodate the length of our board meetings. I later received a suggestion from the community that the board should consider trying different times as part of its trial period. As such, the May public meeting will begin at noon. We will ensure there's a short health break between the public and in-camera meeting for board and service members, but today and at future meetings, I will now proceed with the confirmation of the agenda. So that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirm the agenda of the April 26, 2021 meeting. Is this agenda item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you.
Carried.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. 35 of March 22nd, 2021. Are the minutes carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, so committee meetings, reports from chairs and minutes. At this time, I will ask Finance and Audit Committee Chair Sandy Smallwood to provide a brief update on the last meeting of this committee. Chair Smallwood.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the committee met on the 8th of April, and we received a presentation on the South facility. Some questions that were asked included the future space requirements. What would the future space requirements be in view of the effect of COVID-19 and the increased number of employees who may be working remotely? Another was the possibility of other revenue sources that might offset the higher costs that were indicated as a result of the tenders. And finally, the importance that the facilities plan reflect discussions the board and the service are having on changing the way policing is delivered in Ottawa and to ensure it is in alignment with the community safety and well-being plan being developed by the city. And that's my report, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair Smallwood. As the committee chair of the Policy and Governance Committee, I can advise that at our last meeting on April 20th, we discussed and approved the scope of work we will use to procure external assistance for our strategic planning process. We recognize that a key component of our process will be comprehensive consultation. We made sure to specifically note shortfalls of our previous engagements so we can do a better job of connecting with harder to reach populations and underrepresented groups. The timelines for this work are ambitious. However, we hope to receive a preliminary report to help inform us in the short term on our 2022 budget allocations and priorities, with a more fulsome 3-year plan being delivered hopefully later this year. So can we receive these 2 reports for information?
Received.
Received.
Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest?
No.
Being none, we have a number of public delegates registered to speak today. If you're registered to speak on a specific item, we'll be holding your delegation until we reach that particular item. Some delegates may be addressing multiple items or items not listed on the agenda. We will hear their presentations now. A reminder that only those who registered and who were approved to speak will be permitted to address the board. When I call your name, you will be able to turn on your mic and your video. Each delegate has up to 5 minutes to address the board. The list of delegates on the agenda has been updated since last Wednesday when it was originally published. We'll now proceed with the first registered public delegate, and that is Robin Brown. And Robin will be followed by Sylvia Hughes. So Robin, I know you know the drill here, so you have 5 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Just trying to find my, here we go. Okay. Hi, as you know, I'm here on behalf of the 613-819 Block Hub to ask you once again to freeze the OPS budget this fall. When I spoke at last month's board meeting, I opened by saying it had been another bad month for the OPS. Well, today I'll speak about 2 incidents that show it has been business as usual for the OPS since my last appearance, and that's exactly the problem. The first incident happened on March 24th. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the OPS were called to do a wellness check on a potentially suicidal man, but were given the wrong address. That's not their fault. However, what happened next is, according to the mother of the Black family that lived in the house, Nadia Ngoto, the police first walked to the back of the house and knocked on her 11-year-old son Armand's bedroom window with their flashlights and startled him awake. Her son said he was scared when he saw 3 police officers by his window and wanted to get his older brother, but the officers told him not to move. Around the same time, Armand's older brother, Ozzy, said he was awakened by heavy footsteps outside his bedroom window and saw flashlights shining through the cracks. He said he cautiously opened his door and saw a tall figure who turned around with a large, long gun in his hand. The second incident was the video that surfaced this month of 3 white OPS officers casually talking about how, quote, the white man's day is done, unquote. Let's compare the first incident at the Ngoto's home to the one where the police pulled guns on 7 young Black men at St. Laurent Mall, known as the Valued 7. Chief Slowly gave this board a private briefing on the mall incident that you all said you were satisfied with. Then he publicly showed evidence that the police had responded with guns drawn because they saw a picture of a man with what looked like a real gun at the scene. For the wellness check incident, the OPS press release said they were called to help a man threatening self-harm. So are we to understand that the police response to a man with a gun threatening others is the same or similar to their response to an unarmed man with mental health issues threatening himself? And they want us to give them more money to keep doing that. The second incident gives us more insight into the mindset of current OPS officers, and it's deeply disturbing. The officers lamented that, quote, "Our time is done, the white man's day is done," unquote, and talked about how, quote, "You go to Toronto and every couple you see walking by is mixed, white and Asian, white and East Indian," unquote. One officer then says, quote, "I told my son he can find a Chinese or Asian girl if he wants to stay in the mix, keep his foot in the door," unquote. Chief Slowly has said, to his credit, admitted that there's systemic racism in the force. So we must see these comments from the police not as coming from a few bad apples, but as from apples behaving as expected when they come from a rotten tree. Let's remember, these officers are from the same force that elected Matt Scoff as their police union president in 2011 and then let him run uncontested for 2 consecutive terms after. In preparation for this fall's budget vote, we've asked a number of councilors why they approved last year's $13 million OPS budget increase, and many have said the same thing. They wanted to give the chief a chance to succeed. The 613-819 Block Hub was one of the groups that lobbied to bring Chief Slowly here, and we did so because we also wanted to give him a chance to succeed. And we were happy with what he did in the beginning. He reinstated the OPS Hate Crimes Unit. He created the Respect, Values, and Integrity Directorate and promoted a Black woman, OPS Officer Isabel Granger, to superintendent to lead it. He dealt swiftly with the racist memes that emerged from within the force. And after an OPS officer stopped a Black man for an expired plate on his Audi that wasn't expired, the chief published an Ottawa Citizen op-ed acknowledging that, quote, "Conscious and unconscious bias is a challenge for all police members and that systemic racism exists in policing," unquote. However, everything changed after the Abdi verdict and the breakup of the protests that followed. We now see the chief is fighting a losing battle trying to reform a force that doesn't want to be reformed, let alone fundamentally changed. The OPS wants to continue doing what it has always done: unleash cops to act on their racism and harm and kill marginalized people by criminalizing Black and Indigenous people, poor people, and people who speak out against or demonstrate against the OPS and make a lot of money doing it. We are thankful no one in the Ngota family was killed that day. However, I'm terrified that cops might get the wrong address one day and turn up at my house. My family might not be so lucky. But then again, I don't live in a low-income neighborhood with lots of Black people, so don't really have to worry because I never see police in my neighborhood. The OPS doesn't need more money to achieve its goals. It needs to be forced to adopt different goals, and you are the only ones who can make them do that. Take the first step by voting against the police budget increase this fall. Thank you.
Chair, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Robin. Are there any questions or comments for this delegate? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. I called Sylvia Hughes next, but she's not going to be able to join us today. So we will move next to Jack Belmar, and Jack will be followed by Jen. We have a couple people that have requested to be dropped down to accommodate their schedules, so we're going to try and do that. So Jack, you're up. Okay, so Jack's not on yet, so we'll hold Jack and come back to him and go to Jen. She's also not signed on. Is Juju signed on? Okay, Juju, you're next, and you will be followed hopefully by Julia Falco. So Juju, you have 5 minutes.
Hi again all. Let's hope you can hear me this time. First off, I know several people who weren't able to make it today because of the change to the time. Having these meetings at 2 p.m. makes it impossible for so many people who work daytime jobs and aren't getting paid to be here to show up. I was surprised to learn, too, that the 4 p.m. start time is actually included in writing in the board's policy manual. So why has this board against its own policy, chosen to make these important governance processes even more inaccessible to the public? Procedural matters aside, as other delegates have already and will no doubt go on to cover, on April 17th, Diane Deans released a statement that says, to quote, "There is no evidence to suggest that expanding police enforcement will result in better health outcomes." This is true, as a preponderance of research demonstrates. Not only that, but policing itself is actively a public health threat. This has been recognized by organizations such as the American Public Health Association, which represents over 25,000 public health experts, and now demand abolition. And yet, against all fact and reason, this same board chose to increase the police budget last year. And again, now, we are talking about spending more money, appointing more special constables, spending millions of dollars on this South Campus project. Over and over again, funneling more funds into policing, as the pandemic rages on and the death toll keeps climbing higher. This is unacceptable and it cannot be allowed to go forward like this. Recently, 2 OPS members were caught on video making incredibly anti-Black statements about a person they were looking for, along with small talk lamenting that the white man's day is done. In an interview with the CBC, one of the individuals claims that conversation was harmless and the comments about changing demographics were based off an article he had read. I want to be extremely clear. This rhetoric about white people becoming minorities in Canada is explicitly white nationalist, that is, driven by the belief that Canada should be a white ethno state. It is a myth of white replacement, white genocide, that is circulated among white supremacist publications and that, as has been well established, has motivated far-right mass killers to act. People do not innocuously come across these ideas in reputable publications. They are propagated by far-right media dedicated to churning out the types of articles this man was talking about. I've said this before, too, of the culture that allows so many officers to wear the thin blue line badge, of what that means for the ideas that are popular within the force. We should all be incredibly disturbed at the continual, repeated indications that people given a state monopoly on violence are, at the very, very least, alarmingly comfortable with far-right ideas, not just as a disparate set of individuals, but as collective and a shared internal culture. Finally, relatedly, the data shown in the complaints report is deeply disturbing, albeit also completely unsurprising. Previously, members of this board have tried to undermine people's concerns about police violence because those subject to it had not filed complaints. But why would anyone bother opening themselves up to more potential trauma and harm by filing a complaint when just, statistically speaking, it's most likely that nothing will come of it? That is all I have to say.
Thank you, Jojo, very much for being here and for your presentation today. Because I've heard this a couple of times, I do want to ensure that the quote that I used is not taken out of context. The quote was from a media release from the board about the new enforcement powers the province put in place to have police officers arbitrarily stop people in the city of Ottawa. I had concerns about the province's newly enacted policing authorities to enforce the stay-at-home measures. And it was in that context that I offered those comments. I didn't offer them as an umbrella comment, so I just would appreciate if they be kept in the context in which they were offered. Okay, thank you very much. And maybe just a little bit more on the start time. The board, because we have had a lot of agenda items on our board agenda and a lot of public input, which we appreciate, we were finding that our board meetings after the in-camera sessions were running well into the late hours of the evening. And we're trying to accommodate everyone here. So we thought that if there's to be a permanent change, we will change our procedure bylaw, which is where the 4 o'clock is embedded. But we thought that it would be reasonable to try some other start times to see if we could find the right balance for the board, for all of the people that appear before the board, and for the consultants and legal staff and police staff that are required to attend. So that's why we started the 2 o'clock at this meeting. We received a comment after our last meeting from a member of the public saying, why don't you try other times as well? And that's why we thought we would try noon next time. We're not committed to any of them. We're trying to find a balance that will allow participation in our meetings by all concerned and still not be asking our board members to work into the wee hours of the night, which has happened on several occasions. So that's the notion. We're going to try a few times and then we will decide if we're going to return permanently to 4 o'clock or if we're going to make a recommendation to make a change. And we're happy to receive public feedback on that front. So our next speaker is Julia Falco. Is Julia online?
No, but Jack is.
Okay, Julia is not, but we're going to back up and hear from Jack next because Jack has joined the call. So good afternoon, Jack. You have 5 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead. This is Jack Belmar. You there, Jack? Okay, so we will move on then to Jade Levois. Are you on the call, Jade?
I am, yeah. Can you see and hear me okay?
We can. Please go
Okay.
ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jade Levois. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a University of Ottawa alumni of Conflict Studies, Human Rights, and Indigenous Studies, and I'm a concerned community member. I'd like to echo the sentiments of those who have spoken before me, both today and in previous board meetings, that reflect the importance of freezing, defunding, and ultimately abolishing the Ottawa policing services in general, and the prison industrial complex writ large in favor of lasting alternatives that center community, safety, and care. I'd also like to extend gratitude to grassroots organizers, Black and Indigenous folks who continuously advocate for alternatives to policing and who are the leaders of these discussions and movements in the face of what can only be described as collective trauma. Before I begin, I would just like to ask that for future meetings, if it could be made so that the agenda is loadable on phones. It's currently not loading on my cell phone, and I know that that could pose an accessibility issue for some moving forward. So I just wanted to note that. The discussion of abhorrent behaviors from those employed by a system that's supposedly supposed to protect us is nothing new, but I think that it's really important, especially considering the entitlement that has so obviously been expressed by the OPS in the wake of a public health crisis, that we have discussions such as these. I've come across on my social media accounts and would like to take a few moments to read 2 social media threads from individuals who have already been impacted by what was the expanded police powers over the past few weeks in the city. So the first tweet reads, it's not even been 24 hours since Ford's announcement, and I've already seen the Ottawa Police Services stop a Black man walking and leave the white couple beside him walking alone. The second tweet reads, 4 of my son's friends and one of their dads have already been stopped by Ottawa police on their way to essential work. All were racialized Canadians. Need to rescind this awful order now. I believe that these messages from the community speak to the entitled nature of law enforcement officers to use this heightened power to continue terrorizing BIPOC community members, and that really, really frightens me, especially considering the statistics of that have been highlighted in item 9, which suggests that of the 160 complaints filed, public or internal, from Q1 of 2020, and the 97 that have been deemed dealt with, only 8 have actually resulted in any further action. I don't necessarily believe that it is fair for the OPS to suggest that they are committed to ensuring the accountability of officers for their individual actions and striving to uphold the highest standards of conduct for its members, when this is the type of conduct that's being deployed by officers. When considering the budget for the South Campus expansion, when considering that that's currently valued at in and around $118 million, I can think of a multitude of other ways, and I know that the community has already expressed to you all a multitude of other ways that this massive amount of money could be spent. And I ask that the board halt this project immediately, permanently, not postpone the delivery of phases, in favor of actually listening to community members, redistributing these funds where they're actually needed, and making themselves scarce. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, Jade, for being here and for your input. We're going to return now to Jack Belmar. I believe Jack is on the call.
Hello, thank you so much for bearing with me. So sorry about that technical problem. That's on me. Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you very much for having me here. At our last meeting in March, the board undertook, after a comment from board member Smallwood, thank you. At our last meeting, the board undertook to write a letter to the Ottawa Police Association requesting that they remove the thin blue line flag from their building on Catherine Street. It's been 1 month since that flag, or well, it's been 1 month since that meeting. It's been 2 months since Chief Slowly made his uniform policy banning the thin blue line. The flag is still up, but I was hoping that maybe you could please provide us with an update as to the status of your letter. If the OPA has replied to you, I'd love to know. And also at that same meeting, Chief Slowly had recommended that I approach the Ottawa Police Association for this issue directly. Since then, I have discovered that the OPA does not publicly post their contact information anywhere online, nor do they post their election results. I know that Matt Scott is the president of the OPA because I read the news, but I don't know anybody else who works for the OPA. The composition of their executive committee is totally unclear. I had written to board member Smallwood about this in April after the last meeting, but just wanted to repeat this in person to everybody here. Could the OPSB please formally request the OPA to publish its contact information? Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Jack, for being here. And no worries about the technical trouble. We're all getting used to this new Zoom world that we live in. To answer your direct question about the board, I had agreed after the last meeting to write to the OPA in this regard. That meeting occurred on March 22nd. I sent a letter to the OPA on March 26th. We have not received a reply to date. As for their contact information, I mean, there's a public meeting, perhaps they're tuned in and perhaps they will be prepared to provide their contact information. And thank you for following up today and for being here. Are there any questions for Jack? Seeing none, okay. I'm sort of losing my spot on the list, but I think Cassie Slack will be next.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
All right. Hi, I am Cassie, and I am here again to ask this board to take real actions towards removing police from our communities and repairing the trust that has been broken with us. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the South facility. For those who don't know, the police are planning a $118 million project to build a new police campus in the South End. This year, the community has asked repeatedly for this board and for the city to divert funds from policing to address the needs of the people in the community. This report, while talking about a pause strategy for the project, isn't actually pausing the project. It just defers the completion date. I can say as a resident that I absolutely do not support the creation of a new facility for the police, and I ask the board to actually push for this project to be canceled in its entirety. Next, I have a question about item 5, the Enterprise Mobility Report. The report states that the purpose of this report is to seek delegated authority from the Ottawa Police Services Board for the procurement of licenses and professional services. And this is talking about software and technology. Does this mean that police will be able to make technology decisions without first informing the board? It's really unclear from the terminology what this report is asking for. I'd like to point out to this board that technology and software in policing is riddled with immense bias and increased harm for vulnerable communities. And we should not be delegating any authority to police to be implementing new software or technology without any public oversight. Next, I want to talk again about the appointment of special constables in the city. 2 months ago, several community members, including myself, asked this board not to appoint special constables for OC Transpo and Carleton University. Last month, you brought in members of the Special Constables program to talk about the program. You gave the public no access to the presentations ahead of time and no ability to comment on the presentation, and then you proceeded to appoint special constables. I'd also like to point out that while you maintain that this space is not a space for dialogue, many of you actually did dialogue with the special constable members who showed up to do public delegations. I want to remind this board that it is your actions, regardless of your intentions, that are what build or break trust with the people that you serve. This month, there's another appointment of special constables on the agenda, this time from members of the RCMP. The RCMP have an extensive history of violence, particularly towards our Indigenous community, and I'd ask this board to reconsider this program as it continues to put vulnerable people of the community at risk. Next, I'd like to talk about item 9, the complaints report. Several times over attending these meetings, this board and the chief have pushed people to file complaints with the OPS about mistreatment, stating that these meetings aren't places to hear complaints. We've heard you be frustrated that the formal complaints aren't being made. I'd like to point you to the information in this report as a potential hint as to why these complaints aren't being made in the first place. Out of 97 completed investigations of complaints in Q1 of 2021, 82 resulted in no action being taken. Your own data shows that even when complaints are investigated, nothing happens. I don't know about you, but I really don't like my odds of being taken seriously if I was to file a complaint with the OPS, especially when out of those 97 completed investigations, 46 were dismissed on the grounds of, and I'm quoting from your report, being frivolous, vexatious, over 6 months after the fact on which it had occurred, where a third-party member was the complaint and the complainant was not affected, or deemed to not be in the public interest to pursue. If I was this board, my questions about this would be, what exactly makes a complaint frivolous, vexatious? Why can complaints only be made within 6 months of an incident to be taken seriously? What makes a complaint not in the public's best interest to pursue? Most of the complaints are dismissed under this catch-all reason, and we should be concerned about why that is. I'd like to also remind this board of the 14 women that have come forward to report sexual assault by their colleagues in the OPS. Personally, I don't believe that the OPS has the tools or skills required to effectively handle conflict or repair harm in any way. This is part of why it is so terrifying to me that we give them so much power over our lives and the lives of our communities in the first place. This is why we ask for less police in our communities, because we know that policing is not the institution that will repair interpersonal or institutional harm. We know that policing does not keep us safe. It actively contributes to the types of harms that it claims to protect us from. I'd like to add a last note that the 2 p.m. start time of this meeting is incredibly inaccessible to members of the community, and it should be changed back to the 4 p.m. start time. I'd also really love to hear an answer to my question about item 5, and if you'd like me to repeat the question, I'm happy to do so. So that's all for me.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. No, I don't think there's a need to repeat the question. I understand the question, and I'd be happy to ask it when we get to item 5 on the agenda. Are there any other questions or comments for the from the members of the board for the delegate?
Chair,
Yeah.
I just wonder if the chief could speak to the issue about the use of technology and what protections are in place with respect to the public's expectation of privacy and not that it not be misused. If you could just
Okay, that was pretty much the question I was going to ask when we got to item number 5, but I'd be happy for the chief to answer it now. If the chief would like to answer it now, by all means.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Smallwood. I'm going to call on Deputy Chief Steve Bell to speak to this specifically. The delegated authority is around basic licenses. Any new application, particularly operational application of software, we would seek first to bring it to the board's attention. But for the specific answers, I'll turn things over to DC Bell.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Member Smallwood. So yeah, in answer to the question, the request we're making today, or the delegated authority we're seeking, is not about the extension of any new sorts of technology. It's around licensing and services to improve our IT architecture and infrastructure so that we can use the existing platforms we have and create a better, more mobile system. So what we're not seeking today is the onboarding of any new technologies, particularly to be used in an operational setting. It's a matter of making the systems that we have more congruent to be used remotely, more congruent to be used as officers and members are traveling and moving around. So we also know that there's reliability issues that we have as we have transitioned more people out of our workplaces. So we're looking to build a more strong, robust, strength-based infrastructure to be able to use that. So it is in response to Ms. Slack's question, it's not about new operational capacity, it's about building a better internal system to use what we have.
Thank you. Chair, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Cassie. We're now going to move on to our next public delegation, who is Mar Korkudina, and Mar will be followed by Mohammed McGill.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to request to be moved down on the agenda due to the inaccessible start time of this meeting. I have a conflicting scheduled issue, so please move me down. Thank you.
I'd be happy to move you down, but it's probably going to be, 15 to 20 minutes. It's not going to be hours, but I'll move you to the bottom of the list, Mar, and we'll go to Mohammed McGill.
Thank you.
Mohammed's not on, so we'll go to Grace Zinn. Is Grace on? Grace, can you unmute?
Yes, I could.
Okay, Grace, you have 5 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
Lovely. Madam Chair and fellow board members and chiefs, my name is Grace Shing. I'm the Executive Director of the Somerset Street Chinatown BIA. And having been in this role for 13 years, and this is the first time we're coming to the board and plead for help directly. We did not come to you in the past, not because we did not care about our police services, nor were we shy or speaking out. In fact, as a commercial district with a great concentration of immigrant businesses and clientele, and branded as a multicultural village with an Asian flavor, our ties with the Ottawa Police has been strong, and it's never been broken. Recently, with Chief Slowly's leadership and the return of the NRT, We are excited for a renewed focus on community policing and dedication to deal with tough issues, such as hate crime and anti-Asian racism. Well, after constructive opening, you probably are waiting for a but. There is no but. The reason I'm coming today is with an urgent plea. Our community is in crisis. We need your help. And we believe the police we trust has an important part in the solution. Last Friday, 2 stabbings happened on Somerset Street and resulting in 1 death and 1 serious injury. This tragic event has traumatized our businesses, the employees and customers to an unbearable level. Especially it comes so closely to a fire set to a commercial building, which led to the immediate closure of 2 restaurants in our area last month. So in the past 2 years, our area has been experiencing frequent property damage, including fire, public drug use, shoplifting, and vandalism. The windows and doors of our beloved and historical bank branch have been broken many times. Our small businesses do not have the resources and infrastructure to be adequately equipped for the consequence of an increased concentration of social services. We are afraid that a once vibrant business community could slide into a commercial ghost town if the increased crime is not to be controlled. We recognize that mental health and homeless issues call for social services intervention and assistance, which we have been working with our partners to address. However, the recent tragedy and fires and vandalism have taught us that social services alone cannot and are not equipped for safety threats that can have life and death impacts on vulnerable individuals. We need the men and women who are in the police uniform and with professional training to protect the order of the society and lives. While we are trying to make sense out of the senseless event on Friday, we are very touched by the police response. From the chief to the police officers who were working at the crime scene, they all actively reached out and displayed the force's deepest care to our community. I can't tell you how much it meant to our small businesses owners and employees who are under tremendous stress already because of the pandemic and now are traumatized by the homicide right at their doorstep. We have taken great comfort in knowing that such a professional, humble, and compassionate police force by our side. In turn, I can tell you the police officers who every day put their lives at risk for all of us will have our utmost trust, respect, and unwavering support. So on behalf of the hardworking small business community, we ask the board to see the urgency of the situation and provide more police presence on our street with increased patrols and faster response time to crime reported. So if you can find any abundance in the police budget, please give to us, add to our district. We need more police support and presence. So we also ask for your help to help ensure that Chinatown is and always will be a welcoming and safe destination to live, work, shop, and enjoy for all. We should not be left behind, and we need your support. Thank you.
Grace, thank you very much for being here today and for your thoughtful comments. And we were all struck by the tragedy that occurred on Friday and very saddened for the family and members of this community. We'll go to Member Meehan.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, I'd like to express the same sentiments. But Grace, I don't believe that that Chinatown has an NRT at this particular time. Do you?
We do.
Okay, it is one of them. Okay, and Are you happy with the police presence that's coming in that team?
I can tell you honestly, we are always very happy with our police. The problem is our problems are bigger than the resources of the area. That's why we are coming. And with our social services have been increased. So we are not equipped to deal with it. And I feel so bad for our police that every time when I cry out to them, they always do so much for us. And the chief on the weekend personally email me and phone me. I'm just so touched. I just say our problems are bigger than the resources we have. We need more resources. If you have other places that you may not need that much budget, we need it. We even want to have a community police post right at our doorstep because our problem is bigger than what we can handle.
Okay, I think we've heard you, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Mann. Chief Slowly.
Sure, thank you. Grace, appreciate your kind words about the efforts of our frontline members. And just join the chair and Member Meehan in expressing our thoughts to the family that was directly impacted in one of the incidents. We're hoping for a full recovery and to the general trauma experienced by the community. It's a tiny community, which I'm coming to know. It has great strength and it has great impact and influence disproportionate to its size and demography and geography. But we appreciate your support for the work of our officers in that area, and we'll continue to do our best for you. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may raise one more point, Chair.
Sorry, Grace, we don't allow a dialogue, but I want to thank you again for being here today. There are no further questions, but thank you for your delegation today. And we're going to move on to Ewart Walters. Is Ewart on the call? Ewart, can you unmute?
Will do. All right. Can you hear me now?
We can. You have 5 minutes to address the board. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon to board members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I have no problem with the earlier time because I recognize that meetings that go on after midnight are not in the best interest of anybody. 2 years ago, the OPS board crowned 4 years of discussions with community members and produced an action plan for improved policing and community relations. As part of that plan, Peter Slowly was hired as chief. Chief Slowly has received forthright commendations from several sources, including even the mayor, but he has been handicapped by the following. 1, you approved his goal of cleaning up the OPS internally, but as an appointee from out of town, he has been meeting with significant resistance from the old guard. When Hercules was faced with cleaning the Augean stables, he had to divert a whole river to course its waters through the stables to clean it out. Chief Slowly alone can't divert the Ottawa River. He needs you. 2, with one deputy chief under suspension for nearly 2 years, without any indication of resolution or return, the chief has been doing what birds and airplanes cannot do. He has been left to fly on one wing. 3, faced with criticisms from over 100 people at one board meeting recently about an incident at Laurier Avenue that involved them personally, you have allowed that to drown you in cold water. And so you have taken your eyes off the prize and parked all the bold and courageous steps that need to be applied to changing the OPS culture. Time is of the essence. The chief's 5-year contract now has 3 years left. Flying on one wing makes it impossible to have a smooth landing, if indeed a crash can be averted. So this is a call to action. We are calling on the board to again take up the cudgel. Gradualism will not work. If you do not provide the necessary support, neither the community, the chief, nor yourselves will accomplish anything. And all the good intentions will, after 5 years, remain only that, good intentions, a waste of time and effort. Let's get cracking. Be bold, be courageous. We are behind you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yawik, for being here today and for your delegation. As the chair of this board, I would like to state publicly that we hired this chief, we support this chief. We try and ensure that he is given the help and support that he needs to succeed and to lead this service. If you have some specifics in mind that you would like to talk about, I did receive a letter from you. I am aware of one of your asks, and we can certainly consider that. We'll move to Member Meehan.
Thank you, Chair. You actually took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to ask Mr. Walters if he had any specific ideas or that he could share with us on what he thinks that we should be doing, what more we should be doing to support the chief.
Yes, thanks, Carol. The idea I had was sent in a letter to all board members, and that is that we actually need another working deputy chief. We can't just operate with one deputy. There is an opportunity at the moment to use a vacant position as the basis for creating that third deputy chief position. Whether you create it as a temporary project or whether you create it as a permanent project is neither here nor there as far as I can see. But that would take quite a bit of the load and pressure off the shoulders of the chief and help things to move forward a little easier.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Member Meehan? Member King.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that I believe that the board, in conjunction with the chief, is working towards a structural change and has been pursuing this with a lot of vigor. In fact, we just received a report and approved a report around a strategic plan that will primarily look at reimagining public safety in the city, so going beyond policing to really ensure that we have a more in-depth discussion about the challenges. Since I've been here, the short period that I've been here, we've seen the creation of a new independent community-led mental health strategy and the unveiling of that to really detask police services from around most mental health interventions. So we're starting that conversation. We've approved and we're contributing to a police board task force that is seeking a budget freeze at current 2021 levels. We have approved a mediated consultation process to address building trust with Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities and more. We've approved and are developing a $150,000 partnership fund to work with Black, Indigenous, and racialized organizations who are engaged in alternative models of public safety. And we formalized ties, and I did mention this at our previous Policy and Governance Committee, that Member Neerman had moved a motion to really formalize ties between the city's new anti-racism secretariat and the police service to share best practices concerning the enhancement of equity and human rights. And not only that, we are sitting as a working group in the Police and Governance Committee to monitor and implement a police services equity, diversity, and inclusion plan. So we are taking substantive steps, and these are just first steps And I'm pleased with that fact that in the short period of time that I've been around the table, I've seen a commitment from our chair, a commitment from the chief, and a commitment from the board towards cultural transformation, and we'll continue to undertake that task. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member King. Any other comments or questions for the delegation? Seeing none, Ewart, thank you for being here. We're now going to move to Sam Hirsch.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Sam, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, first I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. Sorry, just give me a second here. And to start, I'd like to echo the points of the previous delegates who spoke before me about the accessibility of these meetings. 2 p.m. is not an accessible time for those who work, and noon, frankly, is even worse. And I'll probably not speak too much today because I didn't have enough time to prepare my full delegation. Neither did many who dropped off this call today. And I understand if there's a particularly long agenda, and I feel for the staff who might have to work late hours, but maybe if the police didn't actually continue to pose a threat to the community, if they actually held their promise of, say, suspending dynamic entries, if the board and our city council actually listened to the delegates who came to this board again and again, then maybe these meetings wouldn't have to be so long. First, briefly, I'd like to speak to the expanded provincial police powers given to the police force by the Premier last week, I believe it was. As the chair of this board said previously, and I'm paraphrasing in a tweet, that more police doesn't lead to better health outcomes. Now I wish that she had come to that conclusion when the police budget increase was made in December, but I agree with the statement and the sentiment. And I know that the chief said he wouldn't enforce those orders or to the fullest degree, and would not be randomly stopping people. But I did hear anecdotally online and from other folks of multiple instances where folks, and particularly people of color, were stopped. And also when asked by media if he would initially enforce this, he was often very vague. So, I'd like to pose a question, and I know there's no dialogue allowed, but if someone could answer this, if someone wants to, I would appreciate it. I'd like to know how much Chief Stoley, if he is even enforcing this order, and what's happening around that, because it seems very unclear if it's being enforced or not. Secondly, I wanted to speak to dynamic entries, which was obviously a hot topic at the last board meeting. Immediately after Chief Stoley said that he was suspending dynamic entries, and I think an earlier delegate, Robin Brown, brought this up. The day after, there was a dynamic entry, and I know the police said that it wasn't a dynamic entry, but we all know it was a dynamic entry. The police accounts completely differed with the eyewitness, the account from the victim. So, I have a lot of issue, and I'm sure a lot of other folks who trust the discretion of the police. So I would also like to ask another question. And again, I know I might not get a response, but if dynamic entries are truly suspended, or at least in the instances that the police chief said they were, because it doesn't seem like that's the case. Again, the board is here to listen to members of the community, to residents. It's not the other way around. You're our conduits to the police, not the police conduits to us. Finally, before I finish, I know that someone who spoke before here was talking about incidents in Chinatown that occurred. A very sad incident, and I know they were talking about needing more police presence, but I just want to clarify that obviously not a lot of people don't actually feel that way. And there's one organization in particular, the Chinese Canadian Collective, which is an organization here in Ottawa, who listed out demands around policing in Chinatown. And one of their main demands was non-police intervention. And I wanted to read some of those demands because I think it's important when we talk about Chinatown and policing, because we don't want to skew the fact that, people don't want more policing in that area. So here are their demands here around non-police intervention. Chinatown Chinatowns have been over-policed for decades, with bylaw often surveilling and ticketing cars of those visiting the area and bringing fear to the community. These are points around non-police intervention. Police often surveil those facing poverty and homelessness, drug users, sex workers, and those without status. OPS, the Ottawa Police Services, has raided Asian massage parlors in Ottawa and held questionable detention of migrant sex workers for CBSA identification. And in solidarity with Black and Indigenous folks who face increased harm, violence, and death at the hands of Ottawa Police, redirect funds. This is part of their demands: redirect funds to Asian-run organizations and defund, disarm, and dismantle the police. So, I know that previous delegates spoke about that, but I just want to emphasize, and then some folks who have brought to my attention after that delegate spoke, not a lot of people feel that way when it comes to Chinatown and policing. And it's not right to increase policing there or to bring in NRTs, because it's not a fait accompli that people support.
Your 5 minutes is up.
Thank you today. And, sorry?
Your 5 minutes is up. Please wrap up.
Yeah, no, I was about to finish. Yeah, I was about to finish. So yeah, that's what I have to say today. And thanks for the time.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the delegation? Okay, I just want to reiterate one more time that I would appreciate my comments not being taken out of context. When I made the comment, it was in the context of additional police powers around the pandemic that the province was giving to police. And so I would appreciate if it be left in the context in which it was given. Okay, we will move on to Jen. Jen's not on, so we will go to Julia Falco. Is Julia on the call? Julia, if you could unmute. Julia Falco. Okay, well, we'll hold that delegation one more time and go to Mohammed Miguel. Mohammed's not on, so we'll go to Mar Corcadina.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Mar, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Mar. Today I'll be speaking against the expansion of the South Campus facility towards the mental health strategy and towards formal complaints processes of the OPS. Prior to this, I'd like to make comment to the accessibility of these meetings, echoing what many have said before, particularly the meeting time. I ask that a 4 p.m. meeting time be re-implemented. Any time before 4 p.m. is inaccessible to working folks and anyone who wishes to participate during the working day. Meetings that go until 10 p.m. are an inconvenience, but what's even more of an inconvenience is a lack of accessibility to these meetings and not even being able to attend them because they start at 2 p.m. or worse, noon. Please re-implement a 4 p.m. starting time. I'd also like to ask for the electronic accessibility to be bettered for these meetings, especially in these meeting documents, particularly the agenda, which is currently not accessible on mobile devices, which is an enormous barrier to participants. Please resolve the accessibility of your agendas so that everyone can access these meetings for the future forward. Speaking to the South Campus facility expansion, I echo what many delegates have said today in calling for a permanent end to the expansion of this project. How dare you attempt to increase police expansion when we've been calling on you to defund for months? We're asking that you defund police. We're still in a pandemic and you've put the project on hold, but there's still a looming $118 million at stake. You want to build a building? Divest from policing, build affordable housing, build an ICU capacity, hospitals. You question whether now is a good time to do this, and you deliberate on whether the mental health strategy is worth implementing through this. Then if you're actually listening, you will see that it's not worth building in the first place. If we want to juxtapose this number with things that we could do with $118 million last year, $25 million was put towards housing and homelessness, and yet on Wednesday or Tuesday, the OPS was complacent in taking down an encampment in the city, which, if past figures serve correctly, that alone cost $15,000 for the OPS. So $118 million towards affordable housing could go a long way rather than tearing down homes for the homeless. I would like to ask when we're getting an update on the mental health strategy, which was put together in tandem with the expansion, and we haven't heard about it since December. I've heard that you've had a hard time recruiting people to participate in the guidance counselor for the mental health strategy. Maybe that's because we don't even know how we can get on this guiding council. You said that you're going to be working closely with community. Where? You claim that the South Campus facility is going to have a new mental health unit. It counteracts your plans for this mental health services plan to divest from cops in the first place. There's really still no plan for this, and no one wants to participate in your plan because we don't even know how to get on it. So how do we get on this council? Worth asking. Thought I'd check in on that. I'd like to speak to the complaints process. Only 8 out of 97 complaints against cops resulted in disciplinary actions this year. What's up with that? The complaint system is basically, sounds like it's rigged, with over half the complaints being written off as vexatious. How are people supposed to expect that this board listens to complaints when over half of them are dismissed under the guise of being vexatious? Lastly, I'd like to speak to Chinatown and comments made by an earlier delegate calling for police expansion in the area. I will be reading a Twitter thread on the topic of the man who died. His name was Carl this past month. May he rest in peace, and may his family have peace in the form of no further police expansion for one. This thread is written by OPO at OD Prevention Ottawa. Reads, quote, "We cannot express enough how important it would be for Carl that we extend love and compassion for the young man who is now being charged with homicide. He has a family who are now in a horrific crisis. He has an entire community who love him deeply. He has a future. Carl knew the importance of accessible, responsive, competent, and meaningful mental health supports, especially for the folks who engaged in the most egregious acts, especially for the communities most discarded by current oppressive structures. Carl worked hard at building a society where everyone could thrive, where humans could suffer less, maybe even a society where young people's mental health and well-being was prioritized. Every demonization, every call for punishment moves us further away from this goal. I leave you with that. Defund the police, abolish the Ottawa Police Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mar. Are there any questions or comments to the delegation? Seeing none, we'll move to May Mason. May is not on the call. We're going to go through the list one more time. Is Jen on the call now? Julia Falco? Is Julia Falco on the call? Julia, I see your name there, but you need to unmute. Is Mohammed Miguel on the call? Okay, have I missed anyone? Seeing none, this ends our public delegations. Thank you very much to all the delegates for taking time to be with us this evening or this afternoon. I'd like to note that some delegates made written submissions which were circulated with the agenda. These include emails from Sabrina Gagnon, Mamta M, and Mary Stewart. So we'll move now to inquiries. Do any board members have any inquiries to raise?
Yes, Chair Deans.
Member Nerman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Deans. I have two inquiries. So the number first, Chief, Woodruff Avenue, which runs north and south, is frequented by thousands of vehicles each day. and connects the fastest growing communities in the West to 417. It has been observed that in the recent years, with the increase in population and vehicular traffic, there is hardly any respect to the posted speed limits in this regard. During late evening and night hours, it has been brought to my attention by various community leaders and youths driving bikes that there have been incidents of stunt driving and street racing of cars. And we need to be mindful that the section on Woodruff Avenue, especially between Fallowfield Roads and Standard Drive, is mostly residential, becoming most vulnerable, and is home to one of the major mosques, which is visited by thousands of worshippers every day. There is no separate bike lanes on this section of road, which makes their lives even more dangerous. Chief, I would like to know if OPS has any plans to conduct traffic study on Woodruff Avenue and plans to install radar speed display signs and or photo radar cameras, response with specific timelines with action being initiated in this regard is expected and will be highly appreciated.
Thank you for the inquiry, Member Nerman. Some of that question, I think, is better put to the Member of Council because speed display signs are done by City Council. Chief, do you want to answer the remainder of that question now, or would you prefer to provide a written response?
Thanks, Chair, Member Nerman. Maybe I'll just ask Acting Deputy Chief Mark Ford to quickly speak to the overall approach that we're using around traffic safety, including some upcoming events. The more specifics of that area, I think would be better answered in a more formal response to the inquiry. But if you permit a few minutes for Acting Deputy Ford to speak to the general issue of traffic safety. Mark?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Member Nerman, for the question. So our approach here is one that is in partnership with our city partners through the Safer Roads Ottawa program. The approach that we've always taken on issues such as the one that you described is through a triple E approach: education, enforcement, and engineering. So what you raise are some very valid concerns. It's something that I know amongst many others that come through the city that we will take a look at. You know, what is critical for that program to be successful is that when people do experience issues, that they do report it. And there is a mechanism for people to make complaints about traffic. And it's important that everybody who is impacted by traffic or road safety issues, such as the ones that you identified, do provide a report, and those are tabulated and provide some of the evidence so that we can apply our resources most effectively to problems such as the one that you described. So in general, and I think Chief, you referenced, is that we have had some targeted enforcement over the last couple of weekends, because I know one of the issues you arose, Member Nerman, was around stunt driving. We do have that appear on a seasonal basis, and I know our traffic escort enforcement officers over the last 2 weekends have gone out there targeting from an enforcement standpoint. But it is not just enforcement alone. It is working with our city partners, as I mentioned before, you know, through engineering, what traffic calming measures can we put in place? Where can we make the roadways safer? As well as education, making sure that people do drive safely, and cyclists also ride their bikes safely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And your second inquiry,
yeah.
Nerman?
Thank you, Chair Deans. So Chief, recently, a few weeks ago, there have been a media story that a TikTok video was circulated about some racist comments by a few of the OPS officers, and I believe OPS investigation is underway in that regard. It reminds me that in or around April or May of 2020, a racist meme was with different versions were circulated carrying mostly the names and pictures of racialized officers of colors. That incident motivated me to engage my fellow board members, community leaders, and leading experts in introducing motion on systemic racism, discrimination, and bias at OPS. And I'm thankful to the board for adopting it unanimously in the month of June 2020. I'm also glad and put on record that the work in compliance of that motion is underway at the OPS. And thanks to your leadership and team headed by DC Bell and Superintendent Granger involved with this important work at OPS in this regard. However, while going through the records, I noticed that one of the OPS officer has been disciplined for circulating a meme with 11 pictures, but I am interested to know that what happened to the meme which was circulated with 13 pictures later on, or any other versions as well in that regard. Was a separate investigation undertaken for all such meme or not in that regard? If yes, what we can expect when we can expect the final outcome? Thank you.
Chief Slowly, do you want to provide a written response to that, or do you want to address it now?
I think, Chair, I can address it best now, but if the member Nerman wants a more formal response, happy to provide one. Member Nerman,
I will be fine with that.
Okay, thank you very much. I can assure the board, I believe I have referenced it at previous public meetings, but if not, a full investigation was done into all versions of that meme that was referenced by Member Nerman. One was successfully concluded involving the original meme. The secondary, and in fact a third meme, were the subject of a full investigation by the Professional Standards Unit. Unfortunately, we were unable to determine whether or not it involved any activities by any service members. We extended the investigation to look at potential involvement, if not creation and attribution, to community members. Unfortunately, the investigation was inconclusive. We were not able to get to a conclusive attribution around the creation or distribution of the second and third memes. Professional Standards Unit has concluded the investigation. That said, should any new information come up that would allow us to reopen that investigation, we would do so. The Professional Standards Unit has a number of active, ongoing administrative investigations into similar types of activities, and we'll pursue them as far as we can, whether or not they involve service members and or community members. Member Nerman, I hope that answers your question, but if you need more information, we'll provide that to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks,
Chair. Those were my inquiries.
Thank you, Member Nerman. Member King.
Thank you, Chair Deans. I have two inquiries that are statistical and analytical in scope and will require a formal written response, which have been submitted to board staff to be relayed to OPS staff. The first mostly concerns mental health, and I'm seeking some information from OPS about mental health calls. While the report in January provided some data, I remain concerned about the real world impact that the length of time the 3-year strategy outlined by OPS would have for those who may need alternative response methods more immediately, in order for service providers and community groups to better understand, advocate, and serve those who remain afflicted by chronic mental health issues and do not want to contact police. It would be preferable to better understand the size and scale of the problem here in Ottawa. The January report has indicated between 6,000 to 7,000 mental health calls a year since 2017, but indicated issues with inconsistency in data. Other jurisdictions, namely Waterloo, which was mentioned in the report in Toronto, can state figures more clearly. And general Canadian data indicates that 89% of 911 calls related to mental health crises do not involve any harmful behavior towards others, and 84% do not involve a weapon. But these were aggregates and samples taken, which didn't account for other factors such as race and gender. But we need Ottawa-based data and information in order to adequately assess what is happening here. So my first inquiry seeks to better frame the numbers for all of us who take an interest in this work to see how we can address the gaps. And where gaps do exist in data, I'd like the OPS to share and outline what they are doing to address those gaps. The second inquiry is designed to provide the public with a better understanding of the timelines and fee structures concerning access to information requests. I've been in receipt of a complaint regarding the length of time processing of a request is taken. In order to ensure equity of access for those who may not necessarily be able to provide payment in the form of a check, money order, or credit card, I'd also like to know what procedures have been put in place during the public health emergency to allow information to still be furnished to those who are seeking it. Once again, I happily will take a formal response to those inquiries, and thank you.
Thank you, Member King. But you want a formal response. Chief, did you want to say anything today?
If the member if Councillor King is intent on the formal response, we can provide all that information formally. I would only just briefly just see if DC Bell would like to address any of the concerns or questions related to the mental health data and the process we would use to address current data quality.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Member King. So I was able earlier to see your request. It is quite detailed and has some specific asks. So we will be able to provide that formally to you in this shortly. I can tell you that it is an issue that we flagged in the original report when we brought it forward in January. It is something we take very seriously. We don't believe we have the best data that we need or that we can be grabbing right now. So we do have a concerted effort that is being put underway through consultation with the community to make sure that we're capturing the right data, we're analyzing it properly, and then we're using it to find best outcomes for those who are suffering from mental health incidents or mental health crisis. In relation to the FOI request, that also will fall under me. And again, I did see it as quite specific. So I will take that away. We'll work with staff to be able to provide you all of the responses to your request, and we'll provide it at a future board meeting.
Okay, thank you, Member King, and thank you, Deputy Chief Bell and Chief Slowly. And we will go to Member Smallwood.
Thank you very much, Chair. I had two inquiries. The first one is, I wonder if the Chief would be able to give the board details of the coach officer training program. I'd be interested to know what vetting potential officers receive, over what period of time their service record would be reviewed, and what would the expectations of their record be? And with respect to training, I'm wondering what additional training they would receive prior to being appointed, and then what training would they receive on an ongoing basis? And I'm specifically thinking of issues like de-escalation skills and dealing with those who are in mental health crisis. So I did provide that in writing to the ED as well, and I don't require a response now. So I'd be happy if there was a written response to that one. And then if you want, my second question, this is a follow-up to the previous inquiry that I had, which was inquiry 1-20-07. And I'm just asking if the Chief could confirm the response to inquiry 1-20-07 refers to diversions under the Judicial Referral Hearings section 523-1 of the Act. And if it doesn't, if he could let the board know how many hearings have been held under this Act and what policies and training there are that would relate to this. And once again, I'm happy to, I don't need an answer now, whatever is convenient for the Chief to reply to that would be fine.
Okay, Chief, did you want to make any comments now, or we'll provide that in writing?
We'll provide that in writing. I do believe one of the first presentations I had the pleasure of seeing was from Inspector Heather Lachine, who provided a pretty comprehensive overview of coach officer program that had been reviewed prior to my arrival and been updated. That's been over a year, so we'll make sure we get something more specific and updated for the purposes of answering the question from the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other inquiries from board members? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. We'll start item number 1, the Chair's verbal report. We're going to hold that item and return to it. Item number 2 is the Chief's verbal report. The Chief also has a report, so we will hold that item and return to it. Item number 3, National Capital Area Crime Stoppers semi-annual update. There is a presentation, so we will hold that item and return to it as well. Item number 4, South Campus Project update. This item will be held, and there are some public delegations as well on this item. Item number 5, Enterprise Mobility Report. Now, there was a question during the public delegations. I had offered to ask it, but Member Smallwood did. Is there anyone else that wants to discuss this issue? Seeing none, is this item carried? Carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 6, Appointment of Special Constables, RCMP. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, is the item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 7, Ottawa Police Service Wellness Initiative Update. There's a presentation, so this item will be held. Item number 8, Workplace Injuries, Illnesses, and Incidents 2020 Annual Report. Are there any questions or comments on this report? Seeing none, is the item received?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. Item number 9, Complaints Report, Part 5, Police Services Act, first quarter 2021.
I had a question on that.
Okay, so item number 9 will be held and we'll return to it. Item number 10, Response to Inquiry 1-21-04, Special Constables and Internal Discipline. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, is this report received?
Received.
Thank you. Item number 11, Response to Inquiry 1-21-05, Breakdown of Special Constable Calls for Service.
I had a question about that one.
So item number 11 will be held. Item number 12, Response to Inquiry 1-21-06, Availability of Bike Lanes and Instances of Complaints.
I had a comment on that one. It's not really a question. If I could just make a comment.
Go ahead.
Member Nerman had mentioned earlier about his concern about the safety of bicyclists because of speeding cars. And I just think that this particular issue, when I looked at the statistics there, the vast majority of these instances where bicyclists were on sidewalks, in fact, I think 13 out of 14 were instances where there was no safe infrastructure. And so I think it's clearly what we're seeing is where there isn't proper infrastructure, these incidences are ending up in the hands of police. And so I think this is something that we really need to work with Safer Roads Ottawa to ensure that this issue is dealt with from an engineering standpoint, so it doesn't keep ending up on the police's table, because that's what's happening. People don't feel safe, and so they're riding on sidewalks because of the lack of safety. So it's really just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the item received? Received. Thank you. Item number 13, Legal Services Status Report 2021 first quarter. Any questions or comments on the report? Is this report received?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. Item number 14, Board Monitoring Requirements first quarter 2021. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, is it received?
Received.
Thank you. Item number 15, Outstanding Board Inquiries and Motions, April 2021. Received?
Received.
Item 16, Letters of Commendation. Is this item received?
Received.
Okay. So that's the end of the consent agenda. So we'll return to our held items. And the first one is the chair's verbal report. I have just a short report. I wanted to begin by acknowledging the tragic events that unfolded in our city on Friday and to express my condolences to the family of Carl Reinboth, as well as the family of the other severely injured victim in that incident. I'd now like to provide an update on the motions that the board carried last fall. The board has been working diligently to move forward with the commitments that were made on a variety of topics. The Finance and Audit Working Group continues to meet to explore options for how the 2022 draft budget can be reduced or frozen at 2021 levels. The Policy and Governance Committee met earlier this month and approved a scope of work document for the board's strategic planning process. The terms of reference for the community engagement process were also approved, and we are actively working to recruit a consultant to complete this work. Our board is committed to improving community safety and fulfilling our responsibilities under the Police Services Act to provide adequate and effective policing in the City of Ottawa. We recognize that having open dialogue with the community is key to meeting these objectives, and that we need to do more to build the trust and understanding that is required for community members to feel comfortable sharing their feedback with this board. I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize that we are committed to pushing the OPS change agenda forward, and that we will continue to learn from our experience as we do so. We will not always get it right, we know that, but we will continue to try and to learn as we work together to advance change and to address the challenges that arise. I would also like to acknowledge public concerns about the rapid spread of COVID-19 over the last several weeks and the enforcement of public health measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Chief Slowly has confirmed that OPS enforcement of COVID-19 measures will be guided by public health and will rely on a combination of education, engagement, and enforcement. I have asked Chief Slowly to provide an update on COVID-19 protocols in his verbal report. And finally, I would like to share an update on the recruitment of a new Chief Administrative Officer. The OPSB has retained the services of Odgers Bernston to help us conduct our recruitment process, and we hope to have the opportunity posted in the coming weeks so candidates can begin submitting their applications. We recognize that the CAO is a pivotal position in the police service, and the board is committed to finding an outstanding candidate in as timely a fashion as possible. And that ends my verbal report. Are there any questions or comments? Member King.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to closely associate myself with the rest of the board as well under your leadership, who really opposed enhanced enforcement measures, which were subsequently withdrawn by the provincial government. I agree with your decision, Chair, that there was no evidence to suggest that expanding police enforcement powers would result in better health outcomes in the midst of this public health crisis. I was also pleased with the police service's decision not to conduct random stops to assess if individuals are in compliance with the stay-at-home order. I was also very much gratified to support the request made by the board to urge the province to continue to focus on measures that promote better health outcomes and to take into consideration the impact of any additional measures on the most vulnerable residents in our city. There are actions, in my opinion, that the provincial government can make concerning public health measures that would make a real impact outside of the scope of fines, such as vaccinating all essential workers or vaccinating people living in infection hotspots, or providing paid sick leave to workers so that they don't go to work sick. These are real measures that would result in improved health outcomes rather than arbitrary enforcement measures such as fines based upon mobility that would risk disproportionately impacting Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities by exposing them to new regulations that would work to restrict their liberties when engaged in the most essential of tasks, such as heading to essential work in groceries or heading to pharmacies. So I'm pleased that a large number of police services in Ontario opted not to use the new police powers under the new COVID-19 orders to enforce random stops. I believe it does make sense for the board, and it did make sense for the board to endorse this view as expressed by the police service. And as a result, I would like to commend the chief for ensuring that his direction was applied in a deliberate and careful way to emphasize equity, legality, and efficacy in the application of these rules. I would also like to commend the chair for ensuring ultimately that the board collectively raised its voice for the protection of our residents' civil liberties. Thank you.
Thank you, Member King. Very well said. And we appreciate the leadership of Chief Slowly and the police service. And I was happy to lead the board in ensuring that we supported their actions. I think they did very well, showed leadership on behalf of the City of Ottawa Police Service. And I think ultimately the decisions that followed were in the best interest of the public. So thank you. Member Nerman.
No, Chair, I'm fine. Thank you.
Seeing no one else, can we receive my verbal update?
Received.
Received. Thank you. And Chief Slowly, it's your turn, so over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Chair Deans, thank you for your insightful and impactful report. I've been listening to and reflecting on your verbal report as well as the delegations today. There were many common themes relating to unresolved historical issues, which have been further aggravated and exposed by the once-in-a-generation challenges we've all been facing over the last year. There was generally a unified and urgent desire expressed for major improvements in policing, as well as in all facets of society, to achieve greater levels of equity, safety, and health outcomes, particularly for those who have the least and who suffer the most. These are themes that most decent, thoughtful community members and police service members can understand and agree, work together, and achieve solutions for. These are the same themes that will be the focus of my report, in which I will outline just some of the strategies and initiatives that the Ottawa Police Service has been working with our community partners on over the last month. Every day, Ottawa Police Service members meet with, speak with, and work with a wide variety of community stakeholders: youth, elders, elected officials, justice system partners, and social service agencies, to name a few. On the presentation in front of you, these are the organizations and individuals that I have met with personally. This includes respected youth leaders and elders from a variety of demographic and geographic communities. That list is extensive. Let me just highlight a couple of them. We spoke with Somali mothers who directly influenced, and I would say inspired, a task force that is now being led by our homicide unit to investigate unsolved homicides. We spoke with Asian community members who directly related to us their fears and experiences that relate to hate crimes that have been escalating since the onset of COVID, other street crimes and intimidation and bullying that are affecting their businesses and their homes and their children and their elderly, as well as their desire for better policing, more directly involved policing within their neighborhoods and within the circumstances around their neighborhoods. And we spoke with the CEO and in fact her entire executive from the Royal Hospital about the overall approach to mental health and addictions, specifically to the service's attempt to involve a whole of community effort to design, deliver, and evaluate a mental health and addiction strategy for the City of Ottawa, and their complete support for that. And in fact, they offered additional resources, expertise, and assistance to us in the short, medium, and long term. Over the same time period, I've also personally participated in an ongoing series of internal, what we call continuing the conversation events. These are internal meetings with Ottawa Police Service members who represent almost every rank and every unit, including meetings with demographic groups involving our Asian members, women, Black and racialized members, and LGBTQS+ members. These meetings included the participation of 690 Ottawa Police Service members in the past month alone. In each of these internal and external meetings, we talked about a shared vision for a healthier, safer, and more inclusive city in which the community and the police would solve problems together. There was mutual recognition of the need for better policing to resolve long-standing, complex internal and external trust issues. There was also mutual recognition for the need for better integration of Ottawa Police Service efforts and the efforts of our community partners to solve increasingly complex community safety and well-being issues. There were important discussions about the need to better share information and share resources, as well as creating shared goals to achieve shared outcomes. Finally, there were meaningful commitments from the community members, community-based organization, and Ottawa Police Service members to be active allies and partners in accomplishing the shared goals and outcomes. I'll now provide an update on a series of critical incidents that occurred last Friday morning in Centertown. It involved a rapid succession of violent attacks and the rapid deployment of police resources to the area. These events bring into focus the core frustrations and aspirations of the vast majority of the community members and the OPS members in all of those meetings I referenced before. On Friday morning, 64-year-old Carl Reinboth was stabbed to death on Somerset Street West, just blocks from the Eccles Street Health Facility where he worked as a harm reduction worker. From everything we've heard about him, including on today's board meeting, Mr. Reinboth was a good person, a dedicated, community-minded, and caring individual who was always there to help the most vulnerable people in our city. His death will be felt by many, including many members of the Ottawa Police Service. Within a short period of time, and only a short distance from the homicide scene, a second person was similarly attacked. This elderly man survived, but is listed in serious condition. Community members called 911 to alert the police to these attacks. There was a quick, professional, and courageous response by Ottawa Police Service members to the multiple scenes in this unfolding deadly event. This included the local Centertown Neighborhood Resource Team and our local crime prevention officer, Stephanie Lemieux. As a result of the combined efforts of the community witnesses and the responding officers, a male was arrested near the second crime scene. Ottawa Police Service Constable David McCullough made the actual arrest. The combined efforts of the police and the community likely prevented more crimes and victimization. Throughout Friday and over the entire weekend, the Ottawa Police Service worked continuously with the local Somerset Street community stakeholders to address short, medium, and long-term issues associated to these violent crimes. Short-term efforts. The Homicide Unit and the Victim Services Unit are working to support the victims and their families, while the Centertown Neighborhood Resource Team and Crime Prevention Officer Lemieux have been trying to provide reassurance to the most impacted residents and business owners, including the Somerset Community Center and the Chinatown BIA. In the medium term, the Centertown Neighborhood Resource Team and Crime Prevention Officer Lemieux, supported by relevant Ottawa Police Service units, will assess and address the recent spike in violent crimes in the area. There was another stabbing homicide in almost the same area last November. And in the long term, the Ottawa Police Service have been and will continue to work with the local community stakeholders, the City of Ottawa agencies, and other community partners to improve community safety and well-being in the immediate area of these crimes and across the Centertown neighborhood. Here's a message that I received over the weekend from Grace Zinn, who was one of the earlier delegates. She's the director of the Chinatown BIA, and it demonstrates the faith of the BIA in the professionalism and compassion of our Ottawa Police Service members, as well as the quality of the community partners that we have within that community. We are very touched by the police response from Inspector Bryden, Officer Ali Togro, the NRT team officer Charles Benoit, and our beloved officer Stephanie Lemieux. To the officers who were working at the crime scenes, they all actively reached out to provide support and displayed the force's deepest care for the community. I cannot tell you how much it meant to the small business owners and employees who are under tremendous stress from the pandemic and now are traumatized by this homicide right at their doorstep. Chair, this message came in from Carol Sinclair, Manager of Harm Reduction, Somerset West Community Health Center. It was an email that she sent directly to Ottawa Police Service Officer J.F. Morin. Hi, Officer Morin. I wanted to email to say thank you for your support on Friday. I'm not sure you were aware at the time, but we spoke at the crime scene on Somerset. I was the one providing you with the victim's emergency contact information as his manager. Not sure if you recall, but a while back, you, myself, Don, and Inspector Dave Zacharias had Faux across the street from there, back when you both were involved in the injection site liaison work. Your support during a traumatic and hectic event for me and my staff on Friday was excellent, and it helped that I recalled you from our lunch and the supportive and collaborative relationship we built during that time. Your colleague who took the statement from my coworker was also wonderful, although I do not recall his name. It was a great moment where the relationship building we do when we are able to can play such a powerful role during a crisis. and it helped to see a face that was familiar and trusted. I wanted to acknowledge the phenomenal work you and your colleagues did, and thank you again. Thanks, Carol. Chair, in consultation with the Crown, the accused male has been charged with second-degree murder and attempted murder for the second stabbing. The Ottawa Police Service and the Crown will continue to consider all options to appropriately address the needs of the victims, their families, and indeed the accused himself. The events that unfolded on Friday were likely intersecting with the social determinants of health, which underpin most crimes. The World Health Organization has identified the following 12 social determinants of health: income, social protection; education; unemployment, job security; working life conditions; food insecurity; housing; early childhood development; social inclusion, non-discrimination; structural conflict; and healthcare. The Ottawa Police Service is a part of the community. Both the police and the public care deeply about preventing crime and victimization, while also trying to help every person in every new neighborhood improve the social determinants of health. This is the core of the City of Ottawa's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. This is the core of the Ottawa Police Service's change budget to address gender-based violence and violence against women in a new work plan that is guided by the city's frontline responders. Co-produce a mental health response strategy where our community partners are taking the lead. Provide more viable solutions to preventing, reporting, investigating, and resolving workplace sexual violence and harassment. Expanding our neighborhood policing strategy into Ottawa's suburbs and rural areas. Developing and delivering anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism training to all OPS members. Reviewing and modernizing our internal human resource systems and our competency framework, and investing in the health and wellness of our members so they can be more resilient when serving the community. These organizational, cultural, and individual changes will take place while our members continue to address a range of everyday public safety issues. That is why the Ottawa Police Service has commenced the following operations. I referenced earlier the Unsolved Homicide Task Force. Our homicide unit launched a task force aimed at solving unsolved homicides. These unsolved homicides undermine public trust and confidence in the police. They contribute to the ongoing traumatization of the affected families, and they can result in escalated violent crime across the city. The victims in these crimes are primarily young men from marginalized and racialized communities. In fact, it was meetings with the Black, Somali, and Muslim leaders, along with the mothers, families, and friends of homicide victims over the last year, which inspired and informed the task force strategy. The feedback from these community members recommended that the Ottawa Police Service increase the amount of Crime Stoppers rewards, have Arabic and Somali translation for all related Ottawa Police Service information, diversify the Ottawa Police Service members in the homicide unit, and utilize the neighborhood resource teams to develop more trusted community partnerships. We will never forget the victims of these homicides, and all of these cases remain active until they are solved. This new task force is a step towards our mission to solve these homicides, support the victims' families, hold the perpetrators accountable, and improve safety of all affected communities. Improving public trust, providing heightened duty of care to the victims' families, and improving community safety and well-being in the most impacted communities will be the important outcomes from the efforts of this new task force. We've already discussed traffic safety in the city. Our traffic unit officers have been busy developing and carrying out traffic education and awareness plans for the spring and summer. Just this past weekend, our officers laid 81 tickets for speeding, including 2 for stunt driving. One officer was caught stunt driving for his 4th time. We received words of encouragement for this activity from many in our community, including Councillor Eglai's message on the presentation slide. Thank you for your assistance on this issue. My community appreciates it. In the coming weeks, there will be a series of OPS traffic safety campaigns aimed at cycling safety, e-scooters, bike thefts, speeding, unnecessary noise, and stunt driving. The work of our traffic unit officers over the course of the entire pandemic has been outstanding. They have truly been at the forefront of addressing community complaints and councillor concerns on a daily basis. I'll shift now to hate crimes. Our hate crime unit continues to work with all communities, but particularly with those experiencing the highest number of reported hate incidents. The Hate Crime Unit has recently increased its efforts with the Asian community due to the escalation of anti-Asian hate incidents. Our hate crime investigators have also been working with the Crown prosecutors to secure the conviction of a man who had repeatedly vandalized a Buddhist temple statue in the city's East End. The man was found guilty of threatening and harassing people at the temple and sentenced to 3 months jail time with 3 years probation. A second investigation related to hateful graffiti targeting a young woman at the University of Ottawa resulted in a resolution that was satisfying to the victim herself. Our partnership with the Crown's Office has been instrumental in moving these cases forward. In 2020, 24 people were charged with 58 counts of various hate-related offenses. We've also begun to see success in hate speech investigation targeting members of the community and toward members of our own service. Last summer, a man was charged with mischief after displaying and uttering hateful anti-Islamic remarks in the Byward Market. He was charged with mischief and he pled guilty. Last weekend, officers responded to a fight at a downtown shelter. During the course of the incident, one officer was bitten by the accused. While being restrained, the accused began making sexually explicit and misogynistic comments towards the only female officer that was assisting in the arrest. Later, while being guarded at the hospital, the same accused targeted a black officer and made hateful racist remarks towards the officer. With the approval of the Crown, the individual was later charged with hate-motivated offenses against our officers. The City of Ottawa and the Ottawa Police Service are fortunate to have one of, if not the best, hate crime investigators in Canada, that being Detective Ali Togro. I want to reiterate that the Ottawa Police Service has zero tolerance for any hate-motivated incident. This includes those directed at vulnerable community members, elected officials, and serving Ottawa Police Service members. We urge all people to report hate-related events to us so that they can be fully investigated. There were questions and comments earlier around dynamic entries. I want to give the board and the members of the public listening a clear example of how the Ottawa Police Service is listening, learning, and changing in almost real time. At the last board meeting, I announced the completion of a review of the use of dynamic entries, which included a decision to pause the use of dynamic entries solely for the preservation of disposable evidence. This was accompanied by enhanced efforts to demonstrate improved duty of care, public trust, and community safety and well-being. Early this month, there were increased community complaints of illegal drug dealing, which was having very negative impacts on the community around Frobisher Lane. The community reached out to our Heron Gate South Ottawa Neighborhood Resource Team for help. The Neighborhood Resource Team then began a joint operation which included our drug unit. The drug trafficking was narrowed down to a specific unit in a Frobisher Lane building. The investigation ended with a search warrant at an apartment where 5 people were arrested and the seizure of a large quantity of controlled substances, along with drug packaging, scales, Canadian currency, and mobile devices were seized. Here is a letter from a community member that was sent to me in the immediate days following the execution of the search warrant on Frobisher Lane. I would like to highlight the outstanding work and professionalism displayed by the members of the Ottawa Police Service involved in the events that took place in our neighborhood. Early one morning, my wife and I were woken up by the sound of a drug warrant being served a few houses from our residence. This was a relatively quiet neighborhood. We stepped outside on the front porch and saw police activity. Almost immediately, a plainclothes officer approached our house to reassure us that all was secure and there was not anything to worry about. The officer in question also apologized for the noise, which in our eyes was completely acceptable and more than reasonable given the circumstances. Later in the afternoon, several members of the neighborhood response team went door to door to explain to all residents what took place and to reassure the neighborhood. All NRT officers were extremely professional in their approach and seemed to be extremely well received by all of our neighbors. I could hear laughs, kids playing with the officers, and lots of smiles. The outreach conducted as a result of the police operation was a complete success in my eyes. I'll now transition to the provincial authorities under the EMPCA. Since the onset of the COVID pandemic, the OPS has worked under the leadership of Dr. Vera Etches and in support of Ottawa Public Health, along with our municipal and provincial partners. This was the case again when we were asked to implement new provincial public health orders that were announced over the course of April 16th and 17th 2021. Since the onset of the border operations, the Ottawa Police Service has been working closely with OPH along with local and interprovincial stakeholders to assess any local public health and public safety impacts. Based on local public health assessments and the inputs of our partners, we have not used any of the extra enforcement measures within the City of Ottawa. Regarding the interprovincial border restrictions, we have made daily adjustments to our border-related operations to achieve optimal health outcomes while ensuring the free flow of traffic and essential service providers. We are currently deploying officers on a rotating schedule of checkpoints, moving throughout all City of Ottawa interprovincial crossings on a daily basis, and we'll continue to do so until the expiry of the provincial order. I'm grateful for the efforts of all OPS members involved in the planning and implementation of these operations. I'm also grateful for the partners who helped us to manage this difficult set of circumstances and the positive feedback we have received from leaders such as CHIO President Alex Munter in the tweet that is embedded within the slide on the public display. Again, it says, thank you at OPS Chief Slowly and your at Ottawa Police team for working around the clock yesterday in real time today to adjust and improve. Lots of positive feedback today from hospital staff. We have been and will remain focused on our stated goal of ensuring our education, engagement, and enforcement actions support improved public health outcomes. We will remember and respect the concerns of our most marginalized and racialized communities about the disproportionate negative impacts that they have experienced during the pandemic. We will also do our best to enable compliance with the EMPCA, including the recent restrictions on interprovincial travel. We recently received a letter from Dr. Vera Etches, which is also portrayed on the screen in front of you, and her partners at Ottawa Public Health. This was shared with our OPS members, and I'd like to take a moment to share a portion of that letter with you. This is from Dr. Vera Etches. I'd like to recognize how paramount the work you've been doing has been to keep our residents safe. OPH knows that we can always count on you to show up in times of need with professionalism and dedication to serving the residents of Ottawa. When unprecedented levels of cooperation are called for, your organization is there to support us. Like all Ottawa residents, Ottawa Police Service members are struggling to keep themselves and their families healthy while providing 24/7, 365 essential services to the million people living in the continent's second largest municipality. The intensity and complexity of this pandemic is increasing. Despite these growing challenges, the Ottawa Police Service will continue to do its best individually and collectively. Chair, I'll now conclude my presentation with some reflections on the convictions registered last week in the criminal trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin. We have all been doing our very best to deal with an incredible and unprecedented array of crises, board members, OPS members, and community members alike. We've all been deeply affected by the COVID pandemic and its global and local economic impacts. We have also been all deeply affected by George Floyd's murder and its global and local social impacts. As the whole world watched the guilty verdicts handed down in the trial, the Ottawa Police Service was reaching out in real time to our local communities that may have been impacted. First and foremost, we listened to our community partners as they shared their feelings. We heard and felt their sense of relief, grief, and in some cases, disbelief. We also wanted them to know that we would support expressions of local protest, but that we wanted to help those participants in any such demonstrations to be healthy and safe. We stand with all local and international communities who have been impacted by the tragic events surrounding George Floyd, which shone a spotlight on the historical and current reality of systemic racism in policing, the justice system, and broader society. As a police service and as service members, we are sworn to serve and protect the community, all members of the community without fear, favor, or bias. We must be part of the solution. We can never afford to be part of the problem. That is why we must all reflect deeply on these events south of the border in order to consider how we can continue our efforts to improve conditions here in the nation's capital. Our oaths of office require that we push ourselves even harder, individually and collectively, to continually demonstrate the highest levels of duty of care in each encounter with the community members, to continually rebuild the highest levels of public trust with all communities. The Police Service Act legislation that governs all police operations requires the Ottawa Police Service and the City of Ottawa to form truly integrated community partnerships. Partnerships that will better prevent crime, reduce the number of people who enter the justice system, and co-produce improved community safety and wellness outcomes for everybody, especially the most vulnerable, victimized, and racialized members of society. Every person, organization, and institution can and should do more to help prevent such human tragedies as the murder of George Floyd. That said, the Ottawa Police Service must first and foremost do our part to address all forms of systemic discrimination within our organization. Much has been done here in the Ottawa Police Service and the City of Ottawa, but we all know that much more needs to be done. We need to do more, do it better, and do it with more urgency. We can only do this together with our OPS members, our board members, our partners, and our community. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Soley, for that comprehensive report. I think it's a really timely reminder of the depth and breadth of the work that the Ottawa Police Service is doing in our community, and also of the global influences that are impacting us locally. So to you, Chief, and to your entire service, we thank you for your hard work and dedication. Are there any questions or comments for Chief Slowly? Seeing none, that was comprehensive. Okay, so received on the Chief's report?
Received.
Thank you. We'll move now to item number 3, our next held item, which is the National Capital Area Crime Stoppers Semi-Annual Report. Pardon me. We have a presentation by Richard Mullen, the president of the National Capital Area Crime Stoppers. Twice a year, Mr. Mullen is invited to present an update to the board on the activities. So, Mr. Mullen, we very much appreciate you being here with us today, and I will turn the presentation over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity. We appreciate sharing our board's challenges and achievements with the OPSB team on a semi-annual basis, and I look forward to sharing with the board and the public some of our success and challenges. So first, thanks. We've been saddened to learn of the passing of one of our assistant coordinators, Janice McClellan, who was with OPS, served with our Crime Stoppers team for the last 5 years. She's missed for her contributions and sort of a good nature and volunteerism with our team. And so we're sad to share that news. We've been working hard to build increased relationships, and recently have formed a new memorandum of understanding or partnership with the Via Rail Canada Police Service. And it's our hope to be able to help with crime prevention specific to their area of law enforcement. And we've seen some positive outcomes already, and we look forward to providing more opportunities for sharing of information with this new policing partner. In relation to our board, we've had a continued sort of opportunity for growth, and we're looking to fill a few spots. If there's anyone in the public or anyone that would be interested in joining the volunteer board of Crime Stoppers, I would encourage them to visit our Crime Stoppers website, just crimestoppers.ca, and learn how they could contribute and help. 2020 was a complicated year for most organizations, Crime Stoppers included, but we're pleased to note that we received just over 2,500 anonymous tips from the public that trusts us with that vital information that we use to help law enforcement solve, resolve, and prevent crime in our community. Those tips led to 22 arrests, 15 criminal cases being resolved, almost 60 criminal charges, over 12,000 in illegal narcotics being seized, and 3 recovered arms, just as a result of 2020 tips. 2021 thus far has proven to be quite successful as well, with the same level of anonymous tips being received. And we're encouraged to see more and more support from local business and the local community to help us fundraise to support not only our program, but the anonymous tip reward program that we are so recognized and known for. In 2020, we had just almost $7,700 in anonymous cash rewards paid out. And just a reminder, those funds are received from donations from the public, the business community at large. There's no direct taxpayer funding in regards to that. And that's important for us. The next item that I'd like to share is that we've started a webinar series with the public in partnership with some of our policing partners, where they've volunteered their time to share vital information with the public. We've hosted one successful webinar so far with Sergeant Arsenault from the Organized Crime and Fraud section, where she was able to share with the members attending information on different scams and fraudulent criminal activity in our community, and ways to have the sort of public be less victimized with this type of crime. Tomorrow evening, we're joined by Constable Sebastien Lemay, well known to the community as a community police officer, who we typically would be out in the public sharing information with different community groups. He's going to join us in our webinar sharing information on personal security. And we're looking forward to this opportunity to keep the Crime Stoppers name and logo amongst the public and share that sort of well-earned trust over the last 36 years. The Unsolved Homicide Task Force, we're looking forward to receiving more and more tips on some of these historic crimes, and any crimes, in fact, that the public has information, whether they feel it to be a significant or a small piece of that puzzle. As our policing partners know, those tips can often bring resolution to older crimes or crimes that are more current and fresh in our society. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments anyone has.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, for your presentation and for being here with us today, and for all the good work that Crime Stoppers do in our community. We appreciate you. There are some questions and comments. We'll start with Chief Slowly.
Sure, thank you. I'll yield the floor to Member Meehan, and then maybe have my comments at the end. Thank you.
Okay, Member Meehan.
Well, thank you very much, Chair and Chief. Just one quick question, Mr. McMullen. Can the public register for the webinars? Because I think this is a great idea to disseminate information and to people can protect themselves. How do people do that?
Yes, they can just simply visit crimestoppers.ca, okay, and they can register to attend this webinar series. Our hope is to extend the series to every 2 weeks on a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, and basically share critical information on our program, but on community and crime prevention methods as well.
Okay, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I will help get that information out for you. Thanks.
Perfect. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Meehan. Chief Slowly.
Sure, thank you. Really appreciate, Richard, your ongoing partnership and support between Crime Stoppers and the Ottawa Police Service. I share in the remembrances and condolences for Janice McClelland, a great volunteer, a great human being, who made a small but significant impact along the way. Your partnership with the Unsolved Homicide Task Force will be critical. In fact, it is the ability for us to apply larger rewards that will likely stimulate some of the tips and other actions that will lead directly to the resolution and successful prosecution in these cases. And last but not least, I will ask our own members, and I will participate myself in trying to recruit effective but also diverse representatives to your board. All boards of directors, whether in the not-for-profit sector or in the private sector, could do with being more representative of the local communities they serve And so we'll look for our own networks to provide you with potential names to recruit to your board. And thanks again for your partnership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And anything that you can do to help share that need, adding diverse members would be certainly a welcome addition to our team.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. McMullen, for being here with us today and for the hard work that you do. Is the report received?
Received.
Received, thank you. Okay, our next item is the South Campus project update. We do have 4 public delegations. Before we get there, Chief Slowly, did you want to have any introductory comments?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I'm going to turn things over to Deputy Chief Bell to frame the contents of the report. We'd be happy to take any questions after the delegations to your choice. Steve, over to you.
Yep, thanks, Chief. Board members, as you know, following the FAC that Member Smallwood provided an update on, we took away the comments and dialogue that we had with the board to come back to you with a board recommendation, a board report with a recommendation to cancel a tender that had been put out late last year, early this year. The reasons for that are manyfold and included in the board report that I'll be happy to take any questions on now or following the delegations. As the tenders came back, we saw escalating costs that we'd received, much likely due to pandemic, and as many other people that are involved in building large projects have seen. When we got those, we had the opportunity to do a little more introspection, have the dialogue with the board, and identified that likely now is a good time for us to take a pause so that we can be more considerate of some opportunities that may exist through redefining and reestablishing some of the work that we've done around building up to the South Building. We know that the city is much more advanced in their community safety and well-being plan, and that gives us an opportunity to look at how we could integrate with other city partners, both community social service providers, community service providers, to look at how we could develop a community safety hub, a policing station that has the ability to integrate and embed other community services within it to look at how we could create a new definition of what community safety and well-being can be. Also, early this year, we've started to have discussions with city partners who have identified and are looking to leverage the ability for us to expand partnerships within that building to look at how we could co-locate some different services with our city, including potentially some of their emergency operations capacities and other public safety side capacities. So what we put in front of you today is a recommendation to pause, to cancel the tender that has existed and pause the movement forward on any sort of construction around South Building while we reevaluate and engage with our public and private partners to look at how we could reestablish that platform to have a better building for everyone moving ahead. So happy to take any questions on that. And I'm not sure, Chair, if we're going to move to the delegations first or do questions.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chief Bell. We're going to hear from the public delegations first, and then we'll go to questions from board members. So we will start. Our first speaker was Karen Freeman. I do not believe that Ms. Karen is on the call, so we'll go to Laurel Duncan.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. First, I wanted to extend my appreciation for previous delegates and all of those that continuously put their trauma, their experience, their time, their effort, and education into these meetings. I'd like to reiterate that other delegates' concerns of the issue of accessing the agenda on mobile, also about being able to make a complaint through the systems in place, as well as continued complaints we've heard surrounding the start time. If it is surprisingly busy at my job, we stay late because it is our job and we are being paid to do that job, like how the board has a job, unlike delegates, to ensure the meeting is accessible as possible to the people they serve, us. I hope after the noon meeting, there will also be a later meeting, for example, 6 p.m. to ensure as many members of the public that want to speak can. The board has the power to shift in-camera items to before the meeting if it is truly about protecting board members' times. A lot of my original comments only somewhat apply given the new decision not to stop but to pause the South Facility building. I really hope the board will truly embrace the words and will soon have multiple dates to ensure accessibility while holding these more in-depth public consultations. I will again stress the need for transparency, accountability, and true meaningful conversations with the public, not only in the upcoming developments and decisions regarding the South Facility, but all of its future decisions, budgets, plans, inquiries, and requests sent to other boards, committees, unions, or provincial and federal institutions. I look forward to seeing the board's process in choosing who and how these consultations are conducted, speaking to another city board, OPS volunteers, and generalized groups of marginalized communities is not public consultation, and I truly hope future plans do not reflect what Chief slowly shared today. I will finish this off with a reminder that police do not support our communities the way social programs can. Police do not prevent crime, they respond to it. Ottawa Police Service members are overpaid crime auditors, and that's it.
Are there any questions or comments for the delegation? Seeing none, I do not believe Sherry Wong is with us, so we'll move to Kathleen Grimes. Kathleen, can you unmute?
Yes, I'm doing my best here. Am I on there?
You are now. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm all right. Well, I don't see my picture up there.
Well, I don't see your picture either. You have to hit the icon with the, oh, there you go. Oh.
Well, okay. I'm sorry. Just give me 1 second. I apologize. Okay, I think we're good. Good afternoon. I'm going to be very, very quick. I hope that I can get through this. I'll do my best. So firstly, everyone's in receipt of the correspondence, I believe. That's what Ms. Logan told me. I'm not going to go over that. I think that the correspondence speaks for itself. I apologize that everyone happened to get that at the last minute. It's just that's the way things seem to transpire. I'd like to give you some very quick background on myself. Probably nobody's even heard of me. So I was born and raised in Ottawa, went to school here. I'm president and general counsel of Site Preparation Limited. I've been in the construction industry since 1986. We predominantly engage in the industrial, institutional, and commercial sectors of the construction industry, as well as heavy civil. I'm actually president of the National Capital Road Builders Association as well, which does all of the bargaining in Board Area 15 for roads, sewers, and heavy civil. Those are 3 specific sectors, and I do all of the bargaining. I've been doing that for many, many years, and I'm the president of that association, which I think I've mentioned. I had to cut a few things out. So some of the types of projects that we're working on right now, I just wanted to give you a sense of the experience that I'm coming from. So we did all of the work for Elliston D&D of about 35 million. We've worked on the OLRT about 7 million. Parliament Hill, our projects have totaled 60 million in the last 5 years. We're currently working on the hole, as I call it, excavating the visitor center, which is 200,000 cubic meters of rock. We're working on the cliff plant, which I think everybody knows about that, the library, CMHC, West Memorial, and the Justice Building. So I'm just going to, so that's sort of my background. There is a little bit of confusion as to whether or not I'm addressing the board to actually deal with the cancellation. We received, quote unquote, an email saying, unfortunately, and this is a quotation, unfortunately, the bids received for the work were considerably higher than the city's budget, and the decision was made to cancel the tender. So I don't know if it's already been made or you're making it, but I'm assuming that we're here today to look at that. So I'm respectfully requesting that the tender not be canceled at this time pending further review. I would ask that the following items be looked at if possible. There are a number of issues. The number of issues start with number one, those in the correspondence and all of the smaller ancillary issues that stem from that. I would assume that there's no intention at all to take a pause, reincorporate all of the documented value engineering changes that were done gratis by the general contractor in consultations with the subcontractors, and incorporate those and send it out to tender. I'm hoping that that is not the case, but that needs to be explored. Number two, it's unclear why the tender is really being canceled. I don't understand that. I don't understand what new changing needs of the community could come up since February, but I mean, I'm not really well aware of that, but I think the public should know what type of issues and what stakeholders are involved in that, and it should be documented. Does that mean that the intention is to go back to square one with the design of the building based on what stakeholders and the community has to say at this point? I think that the third item, we need to look at what's in the report itself, dealing, number one, with market inflation. I'm not sure where market inflation fits into this. I look at market inflation. Does that mean that they think the bid is too high because there's market inflation? We don't see that in the context of those three projects. We're working on the library, we're working on the hill, and as a matter of fact, we tendered this job, we were low and we need the work. There is no labor shortage at this time. In fact, we're getting a lot of people into the construction industry right now coming from other businesses that in fact are closing, like restaurant businesses, etc. Pandemic legislative changes, not sure what that's got to do with canceling the contract, unless you're waiting for the pandemic to end 2 years from now. I'm not really sure. Everyone in construction has adjusted to that. In fact, we do testing every day. We have rapid tests. We figure it out. It's really not a huge impact. Insurance force majeure.
Kathleen, your 5 minutes are up. So if you could just wrap up, please.
Okay, I'm going to make it really, really quick. I think one of the most important thing here is to look at the information that's documented in there. There's no substantiation for the 10 to 40% increases. Government of Canada, Ottawa, non-residential increase in 2020 is 3%. I think that you need to look at what those reports say, read them, and ensure that you're making informed decisions, because I really believe that if you read those reports, you're going to see that the methodology is very, very different that they recommend. Look at the steel prices. How does that impact?
I'm going to hold you there. Thank you. Your 5 minutes is up. Thank you for being with us today. What the board is being asked to do today is to pause and reset the discussion, and we will have that conversation after the public delegations. So are there any questions or comments for this delegation? Seeing none, thank you again for taking your time to be with us today. I'm going to recall Karen Freeman. I don't believe Karen has joined the call. And Sherry Wong, also do not believe they've joined the call. So that ends our public delegations. So now we will turn to questions or comments on this report. Member Meehan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to ask the question that Kathleen Grimes asked. Are we going back to square one? If we vote to, or if we decide that we are going to go ahead and cancel the tender, does it mean that we go back to square one?
So Member Meehan, I can answer that. Absolutely not. There's been considerable amount of work that's put into this. There's been a lot of internal scoping. There's been a lot of community consultation and community expectations placed around the building of this building. So we have absolutely no intentions of going back to square one. When we went to tender, we saw that there was escalating prices above what we had originally budgeted for. With that, we identified the opportunity to take that pause, to leverage the strat plan that the board's building, as well as the 2022 budget preparations that are going on, to look at how we build in our community safety well-being plan more fulsomely into the approach that we've already taken, how we partner with the city to mitigate and lower costs moving ahead. How we incorporate pandemic changes that we've seen within our own workforce. So when the numbers came in higher than what we had anticipated or budgeted for, it lined up with a lot of other opportunities that we could look at to make sure that we build the best building that meets the needs of the community in those areas, to be able to provide the best service that incorporates community and safety well-being move ahead. There is no intentions of a complete redevelop on this. This is truly a pause to look at how we incorporate those factors to move ahead and come back to the board in late Q3, Q4 of this year with an anticipated plan.
Okay, so but canceling the tenders will mean we'd have to re-tender, and we have been warned that if we do in fact do that, the cost will be even higher. Are you anticipating perhaps that, are we working of it? Could, if we're not looking at a police facility headquarters like we were anticipating, that we could actually come in with a project that would be less expensive in the long run? Is that the hope, Steve?
Well, so one of the things that we have looked at more broadly is how can we bring community or social serving agencies into that area, which would mitigate costs for us? How can we partner better with the city to look at how we can align with some of their public safety and community safety and well-being provisions? So while it will take some time to rescope it and redevelop it, but there is the opportunity for different revenue streams that we're looking to bring in to offset some costing and get us to what our budget package has been anticipated as.
Okay. So that could possibly offset the increased costs that we will be looking at.
That's the work we're intending to do, to come back with a fulsome package of meeting the needs of the police service and the community.
What will it mean to the Greenbank Road and the Leitrim stations? Because we've been planning this in tandem with closing those facilities down.
Yes, so our facility strategic plan has taken that into consideration. The closing of those two buildings has been put off somewhat for a period of time. So we've incorporated that into this pause strategy. So we will have adequate facilities until we bring this forward with our new plan. So it was a consideration that we looked at, and it won't impact us immediately.
But so you wouldn't be closing those facilities in 2026 as we originally thought then?
No, it is still part of the plan. It absolutely is still part of the plan to leave Leitrim because of the construction that's going and the demolition of that building, as well as to return the capital asset at Greenbank back to the city. Those dates have been pushed farther out, which has given us some flexibility in redeveloping this plan and pausing this project right now.
Will you continue to put all the various services that you were hoping into this? Would that be the plan going ahead? A Marine unit, the K9 unit, the tactical unit, will that you still think that that's going to go in there eventually?
So that'll be part of the pause, as an assessment of that. The strong indication now is that many of the services that would have gone there originally will still continue to be moved into that facility. What we're looking at is better opportunities to partner with the city, better opportunities to bring in community safety and well-being resources into that structure. So I don't believe that there will be a large change in the assets that we were going to put in that building initially. It's just a matter of how do we create a better community safety well-being building in that area for those communities.
Can you tell me, have you begun talks with other departments or other social services in the area?
Very preliminarily, but that's part of the plan that we're going to develop moving ahead. How do we reach out to those groups? How do we engage the city moving ahead? We know we've had some early discussions with them, and there is some interest in looking at partnership opportunities. But part of the pause is to look at how will we do the right, a fulsome consultation plan with the right partners to look at what the potential opportunities are there.
And how long are you expecting this will take?
So as I said, we're looking to bring it late Q3, early Q4. So we're planning around 6 months to come back to the board with a plan.
Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Min.
Thank you, Member Min. Member Nerman.
Thank you, Chair Deans. Steve, I will be very brief. DC Bell, can you please confirm to the board that all the rules and regulations in regard to the calling of the tenders and cancelling thereof for this facility has been followed to the book?
So thank you for the question, Member Nerman. The short answer for me is yes, absolutely. City procurement has been an active partner through this entire procurement process. They've been the lead in giving us guidance and directing the procurement as it's moved ahead, right up to the posting of the tender, right up to the cancellation, the recommendation for cancellation of this tender. Will McDonald from City Procurement is here. He can validate all of that for me.
Madam Chair, I agree with Deputy Chief Bell. I can confirm that all of the requirements of both the request for tender and the procurement bylaw have been adhered to.
Thank you very much. That was my only question.
Thank you, Member Nerman. Member Sueda.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Member Mian's question, I think Deputy Chief, you mentioned that you wanted to try to partner with various community safety resources within the city to help offset some of the costs or generate revenue streams. What would be some examples of those groups?
So it's a very good question. Part of what we're going to do initially is go out to community serving groups and see if there is the potential or desire for them. We're building mental health, the community is building with us a mental health strategy moving ahead. What would be the ability for social service providers in the mental health sphere to work in a co-location environment? What sort of youth serving agencies could use space in that environment to help provide services to their community in that area? I don't have a definitive answer or list on who is actually could potentially sit in those places, and that's exactly why we wanted to take this pause to do the proper assessment and get the proper information from the community services that could co-locate with us, as well as their interest in that. So that's part of the pause. That's part of the plan. When we come back in later this year, we'll have much more fulsome, better, and informed answers to be able to provide the board.
So just a follow-up, Deputy Chief. So in this pause, after you've done some further investigation and further research, would you be able to come back to us with a specific list of groups that you're referring to?
We will be able, so we'll be able to come back to you with the groups that we've consulted with, the groups that we've talked about, the groups who could actually contribute with us to community safety and well-being. Absolutely, we can do that. That's what the consultation has to suss out for us.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Member Sueda. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, the board is being asked to approve the recommended project pause in the reassessment strategy for the South Campus facility as outlined in the report. As the chair of the board, I would recommend that we take this recommendation and accept it and ask that there not be another delay in coming back in Q3 or Q4 of this year. A lot has changed in the policing world and in the broader world and is continuing to change. And, you know, we have to make sure that what we're building for the future aligns with where we're going as a police service. And we have seen some rapid change. We've seen a desire for change. This board has said that we want to change. And I think, you know, we need to align with that in moving forward. We do have some pressure. We are under a timeline in terms of Leitrim and Greenbank facilities closing, and we do need to keep going with the project, but we need to make sure that we're getting the best value for money that we can moving forward. And you know, this would be an easier decision for us if we had a crystal ball, because for sure the costs of construction are escalating so rapidly that if I have a concern, it's about the next tender, because I know that just the supply chain issues and the demand for construction has really sent the prices skyrocketing. And I worry that 6 months from now, it will be even worse than it is today. And so that is certainly a concern that we all need to keep in mind. So I think in making this decision, the board has to weigh the cost benefit of a pause in the program. I'm willing to accept the recommendation from the service that this is in our collective interests and in the long-term interest of our community to take this time to pause, to reflect on what's going there, to see if we can better align with other city services moving forward. And so I would agree that we should accept the recommendation in the report today. Can we carry that?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. So we'll now move to our next held item, which is the Ottawa Police Service Wellness Initiative update. And Chief, I will turn this item over to you to introduce your staff making the presentation.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to hand the microphone right over to Deputy Chief Bell and his team.
Thank you, Chief. Got a lot of airtime tonight. So we're very happy to be bringing forward an update on our wellness plan and our abilities management section. In this board report, you know you've gotten a workplace injury, illness, and incident report. This is a companion to that because it will explain some of the information that is contained in that report, but just as importantly, more importantly, it'll actually explain some of the initiatives that we're undertaking to try and make those numbers better, try and make this a better, more safe environment for our members to work in. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our Director of Wellness, Ms. Angela Slobodian, who will run through the presentation, and then following that, we'll be happy to take any questions. That is assuming Angela is on.
I am on. It just
there we go.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Bell. Good afternoon, everyone.
Angela, can you turn up the volume on your mic? We're having trouble hearing you.
Thank you for letting me know that. Is this better?
Not really.
Not really. How about that?
Can you say a few more words, Angela?
Is this better?
It's very quiet.
Oh boy. Okay. Hang there with me for a second. Okay. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. My apologies. So good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the Police Service Board about the 2020 Annual Wellness, Safety and Abilities Management Report. As Deputy Chief said, I am the Director of Wellness and Safety. During 2020, I was also Director of Health, Safety and Wellness, which is why I'm speaking to you today. Next slide, please. The This slide provides a pictorial representation of the work that has been happening in the wellness sphere at OPS, starting in about 9 years ago. In 2016, OPS dedicated a single resource to begin to build a wellness strategy and promote for all OPS members. This resource was me. As an occupational health nurse, I was thrilled to have this opportunity to look at being proactive and intervening early to aid our members in preventing illness and injuries, and looking how we can build resiliency with all our members, sworn and civilian. Since that time, we have had 4 sergeants and 1 civilian permanently added to the wellness team, along with 1 WSIB coordinator added to the abilities team. We've also added another civilian member in a temporary position within the wellness section. The commitment to these resources have been critical for the creation and implementation of the peer support program, the early intervention program, reintegration and return to work, and to manage the WSIB workload. Next slide. Next slide, please. Our commitment to health, safety, and wellness aligns with the 3 pillars which Chief Soley has identified for delivery of service. Duty of care, community safety, well-being, and public trust overlap. The work that is done by all our members emphasizes the importance of our duty of care to our members as well. We want to ensure they can bring their best self to work, so they in turn can deliver care to the communities they serve and live in. The development of our programs take into consideration mental health pressures, the context of delivering services to our community, for example, the pandemic, and representing personal privacy while providing the appropriate supports. Next slide. Today, the Workplace Injuries, Illnesses, and Incidents 2020 Annual Report was received by the board. This report meets the Chief's requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Policy. The Ottawa Police Service is aware of the inherent risks associated with policing and cares about the health and safety of the members of this service. Through policy, monitoring, and training and practices, the OPS seeks to reduce the impact of workplace injuries and illnesses and strives to provide a healthy and safe environment for all our members. Injuries and illnesses can affect individual members and the OPS in a variety of ways. Direct impacts include pain and suffering experienced by affected members, the monetary costs associated with compensation and treatment for the affected members, and fewer OPS members available to serve the City of Ottawa. Indirect impacts include things like reduced member morale, suboptimal resource use, and diminished operational performance. When a member becomes injured or ill due to a workplace event, or becomes aware of an incident that could have caused an injury or illness, the member is required to report the event to a supervisor. Supervisors are responsible for attempting to identify potential contributing factors related to incidents and identifying a potential corrective actions to help prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. Supervisors must document these events by completing a workplace injury, illness, and incident report form. These forms are submitted to the abilities management team to process. This table represents a breakdown of the events members recorded and submitted by this form. Healthcare and lost time, injuries and illnesses, must be reported by OPS to the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, or WSIB. Consequently, these types of injuries and illnesses are referred to as WSIB reportable. As you can see, in 2020, there were 177 WSIB reportable incidents. Next slide, please. The most frequent injury and illness category from 2020 was musculoskeletal. This is consistent to previous years as well. Causes of these types of events can include lifting, pushing, pulling, awkward postures, overexertion, and repetitive movements. Resulting injuries and illnesses include things like sprains, strains, soft tissue injuries, and repetitive strain injuries. Other noteworthy findings from 2020 WSIB reportable injury and illness data shows that 85% of injuries and illnesses involve sworn members, and 26% of sworn injuries and illnesses result from interactions potentially with non-compliant individuals. Next slide. The numbers referenced on previous slides were all illnesses and injuries caused cases that were occupationally acquired. This slide reveals all cases, occupational and non-occupational. Occupational cases are injuries and illnesses acquired through the course of your duties. Non-occupational injuries and illnesses are not related to your work. These 460 cases, and as you can see, 207 are absences and 253 are related to accommodations, were being supported by 4 disability case managers at the end of December 2020. Although we have seen an increase in the number of cases year over year, it is important to see the activities surrounding return to work. 168 cases were closed, with almost half returning to their substantive position without any need of an accommodation. Identifying modified duties for our members when formal medical accommodations are validated is not only required by the Ontario Human Rights Commission under duty to accommodate, it also allows for our members to stay engaged with work, support the recovery, and mitigate the financial and resource impact of a member being away from work. This slide shows that 55 members were able to return to their substantive position with some modified duties supporting their accommodation needs. I will speak more about the enhanced focus on return to work and reintegration later in this presentation. Next slide, please. OPS is committed to delivering wellness programs and health promotion initiatives to benefit our members, their families, our organization, and our community. Our goals are to develop an environment that is strategically led and supported with dedicated resources, improve policies and programs, foster a culture with increased trust, reduce stigma, and improve practices around wellness, support individuals in their wellness journey to be more aware, engaged, and motivated. 3 factors have been shown to have an impact on the wellness of first responders: organizational elements like the environment, social elements like culture, and personal care or individual self-care. We are committed to supporting the goal of building an organizational culture that understands and supports members' health and wellness. We are focused on achieving this by strengthening our understanding and support of health and wellness issues in the OPS through training and education, by providing and promoting the utilization of a variety of programs and services to support members' emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, and familial health. As noted on the first slide, a great deal of work has been accomplished by the team thus far, but there is so much more to do. We need to remain nimble in order to respond to our members, families, and retirees. The increase in demand on our wellness team is a reflection of the demand on all our members, families, and retirees. The pandemic has certainly challenged all families at a whole new level. Our OPS families share in these pandemic stressors when they're at home supporting their parents, children, partners, siblings, and neighbors. In response to the ever-changing environment and increased demands on our families, the wellness team is committed to continue to build on mental health awareness, programs, and supports for our supervisors to assess their direct reports and one another. Through education, destigmatization awareness, and responding to the current events, the wellness team continues to look for new and innovative ways to support our members, families, and retirees. Next slide, please. Throughout the presentation, I've spoken about the financial commitment that OPS has given to the wellness team. This pictograph provides us a representation of those additional supports that the financial resources have provided. The wellness team was stood up in 2017 with 2 sergeants. In 2020, OPS supported the permanent addition of another sergeant and a civilian member to the team. The wellness analyst works with the reports to the Sergeant of Resiliency Coordinator. The primary role is to review the data being identified within the EI process for the sergeant's review. Commitment to these roles allows the team to extend its reach beyond our active members to families and retirees, fulfilling our mandate of pre-hire to post-retire care. These resources provide capacity to develop and implement wellness programming like peer support, early intervention, and return to work reintegration programs, which ultimately positively impact our members at work, away from our work, to our retirees and families. Next slide. We know a lot about our people through performance management, absenteeism monitoring, training schedules, and various other measures of reporting. EI, or early intervention, takes us to a new level that brings those items together under a wellness umbrella to aid our supervisors to help members before a potential problem may become a workplace issue for the member. In the first 3 quarters of 2020, the focus of the wellness team pivoted to see how we can best support our members and families during the first and second wave of the pandemic. We never lost momentum on launching the program, it just slowed down. We continue to move forward with the infrastructure development. I'm thrilled to share that the EI program launched on April 1st. This program will aid our members with receiving or reaching out for support. Many police services have an EI program. OPS benefited from learning from other services and making this program one built by us for us. We also engaged in internal and external consultation, including speaking to mental health professionals in our community. Although we have just launched, all indicators suggest that this program is being embraced by our supervisors. They're appreciating the support and suggestions on how to help their direct reports if their member requires resources in some form of intervention. Next slide. OPS has a sergeant who is the peer support coordinator. We have 37 peer supporters who represent family members, retirees, and active sworn and civilian members. Peer supporters are those who wish to formally offer their support to others. The pairing with a peer supporter is often about identifying a shared lived experience. Peer support happens informally amongst our members. It's going for coffee when we could do that before, or going car to car to debrief after a difficult call. Our peer support coordinator, Brent McIntyre, plans to recruit more members to this team in 2021. I believe, because I've heard it from so many people, that our peer support program has been so successful because it was developed by our members for our members. Just like a healthy relationship needs trust, so does a successful program. Trust is the foundational piece to peer support. The peer support program, and in particular Sergeant McIntyre, is often sought out to speak at various conferences across the provinces in Canada, as well as the US. OPS has been a vital player in building a community of practice amongst first responders within Ottawa, as well as within the province. Partnering and sharing best practices helps us all become stronger and destigmatize the act of reaching out when help is needed. Next slide. With the increased complement on the wellness team, we now have a greater capacity to reach out to our members who are currently off work on medically supported absences. In addition to the importance of the chain of command remaining engaged with a member while off on medically supported absence, the collaboration between the abilities team, the wellness team, insurance providers, training and development teams, and the members' treatment teams provide OPS an opportunity to aid the member in returning to work with a care plan that sets the member up for a successful return to work. The reintegration and return to work plan support has been embraced by many services across Canada. The Edmonton Police Service have driven the reintegration training. This training focuses on exposing the member to those potentially triggering events in a safe environment with the support of their personal treatment providers. Although the work done in this realm has been limited in 2021, all indicators thus far has been positive by treatment providers and members. Next slide. We know that OPS has many programs and services, both internal and external, that we can help direct members to, including retirees and families. The challenge is not having programs that provide the access and finding the right resource when you need it. Finding the right service can be overwhelming, especially if you're in crisis or feeling distress. This is where the wellness portal comes in. A wellness portal initiative was first identified as a project in 2019. This commitment to this resource was born out of the coroner's report, Staying Visible, Staying Connected for Life, which was released in 2019. OPS has intention to turn around the portal in an incremental way in 2021. We envision this portal as being another tool for our members, families, and retirees to access the right supports when they need it and in a way that meets their needs. Finally, OPS is committed to continuing to respond to what our current experience is, and we look to innovate to respond to the changing needs of our members. We will do this by training our supervisors on accident investigation, This will provide insight on root cause analysis, which in turn leads us to understand what may be needed to mitigate risk, injury, and illness. By looking at enhancing our response to our members' accommodation needs to allow them to maximize their potential, align with their career aspirations, and mitigate human resource losses. By reviewing our approach to disability management, and by enhancing how we connect with our members, families, and retirees. Thank you all for your attention and opportunity to share the good work that is happening by our team of compassionate professionals.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. Member wellness is very important to us. It's one of our strategic priorities, and it's obviously very important. And we appreciate all the work being done in this area. Member Johnson has a question. Just before she does, I just want to point out that Member Johnson has been participating in vaccinating our residents in this city. So Member Johnson, thank you so much for that effort that you're putting in. We really appreciate it. And I know our community appreciates you and all of the other healthcare workers that are working so hard to keep us all safe. So Member Johnson, over to you.
And thank you, Chair Deans, for those comments. I really appreciate it. And as a community physician, it is important really to all of us to try and do what we can in the community to reduce the load on our emergency room colleagues and ICU staff. I just had a brief question. This certainly looks like a very broad and innovative wellness plan, which I think is fantastic. In terms of the peer support program, I just wonder if diversity has been considered in this so that our peer support is really feels welcoming to all members. So gender diversity, racial diversity, and just really making a comment, but it could be a question if you have that information available. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson. If it's okay, I'll respond. Certainly, when we stood up our peer support program, we opened it up to anyone who wanted to be a part of the program, and lived and living experience was important to create a diversity in options for people when they need it, families, retirees, and active members. Certainly, as we look, there's diversity amongst our current support program supporters, peer supporters, but we certainly can always look at growing that. So I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Anything else, Member Johnson? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Angela, for that presentation. Received on the report?
Received.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next held item, which was held by Member Smallwood, and it's item number 9. Member Smallwood.
Thank you very much. I just had something I wanted to get a better understanding of. The complaints report, specifically the automated speed enforcement issue. I noted that there were, I guess as a result of these cameras picking up, what I understand from reading the report is that they're picking up police officers that are either speeding or running red lights. And that's creating a, when the issue comes to attention, what I'm guessing is this creates an automatic chief's complaint. So I guess that's one thing I want to understand if it was, because as I guess I would understand the policy would be that police officers would be expected to abide by all Highway and Traffic Act rules and regulations, except in the circumstances where there was some unusual event that would cause them to either speed or run a red light. So I just wanted to confirm that I'm guessing in events like that, this event would have been noted in the officer's notes. They would have logged the event, and then that would be compared to the these summonses that were issued. And I just wanted to make sure that was the case, that there was essentially justification, which would be recorded in the officer's notes, which would explain why the chief's complaint ends up being lodged for either red light camera or speeding infractions.
Chair, with your permission, I'll just have Inspector Hugh O'Toole, who oversees our professional standards unit, provide a response to Vice Chair Smallwood. Thank you.
Hi, can everyone hear me now?
We can, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chief, and thank you, Chair Deans, for allowing me on, and thank you, Councillor Smallwood. It's a very good question. So, any incident involving a driving issue automatically generates an internal or Chief's complaint. It comes to professional standards. It's automatically investigated. We get a full report back on the circumstances that the officer was involved in at the time. So right now they have the red light camera process has been in place for a number of years now. Automated speed enforcement cameras, as you're aware, only came into effect in July, August of last year. So we've just started to tabulate those statistics now in the first quarter. And we're in the process of developing a system of accountability for our officers where they're caught on a speed camera that mirrors our red light camera investigation process. And basically what we do is when we do the investigation, then we look at it against any exceptions in the Highway Traffic Act for red lights or for going over the speed limit. For red lights, it's a very, very narrow exception. In fact, the law says we have to come to a complete stop, activate our roof lights and emergency sirens before proceeding through. With speed, it's a little bit more broad. The Highway Traffic Act simply says that we have to be in the lawful execution of our duties. So those are the two ultimate lenses that we're looking at when we're determining if remediation is required. All red light and speeding offenses and collisions involving police vehicles at a bare minimum are tracked on a member's performance log. So it is a cumulative progressive discipline. Depending on the circumstances, we start with education and then we move to progressive discipline up to and including deduction of hours from pay. And then I think on a fourth, on a fourth offense, then it becomes much more, it continues on with professional standards, and then we look at additional remediation such as driver training or if you have to initiate a hearing under the Police Services Act, if it's serious. It very rarely gets to that level, usually by for repeat offenders, second or third time, forfeiture of hours, driver training, it's enough to correct the behavior.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Member Smallwood. Chief Slowly, I saw your hand up. Did you want to add anything?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Okay, seeing no further questions received on item number 9. Received?
Received.
Thank you. Item number 11, also held by Member Smallwood.
Thank you. I was interested in the issue, the breakdown. It's quite a comprehensive breakdown of reasons why the special constables may take action or actions that they're involved with. But the one thing in the comprehensive breakdown that I know had been raised by members of the public and I didn't see was anything with respect to fare avoidance. And I'm just wondering if that's captured under a heading like perhaps trespassing or something, because that was something I know had been raised and I don't see it specifically mentioned there. So is it captured somewhere? Thank you.
I'm not sure who to throw that question over to.
Yeah, Chief, I believe it's supposed to be Jamie Dunlop. I'm not sure if Mark Ford is versed in this yet, but if not, I can answer the question.
Okay, Steve, why don't you go ahead unless Mark's able to jump in.
Yeah. So, Member Smallwood, great question. What we did is we captured stats as it relates to provincial offenses and criminal code interventions that they would have had. There would be a whole nother set of interventions through bylaw that that would be captured in the regular duties and only be captured by bylaw services and the city. They wouldn't be captured in our record keeping because they don't directly follow under as part of our mandate.
So then the public's concerned about special constables or police being on there enforcing fare evasions it's not something that would be a concern. It shouldn't be a concern then that's what they're doing.
So it's not something that we would capture records on readily. It is something if there's a further amendment to the inquiry, we need to go and get that information. We can go and seek it out, but it wouldn't be a set of data that we would collect in terms of the activities that they were undertaking.
Okay, I think it would be good to know this is a concern that has been raised by the public, that the police are enforcing fares on people who are unable to pay. And so I think I would like to know whether or not that is actually happening and to what extent it is happening.
So the only amendment I will make to that is this is a report on the activities undertaken by special constables that have been appointed by the board. What I can tell you is the police service, the Ottawa Police Service, does not engage in any sort of fare collection or fare monitoring in OC Transport or any other public transit. We don't capture in this report the activities of what may be done in that by OC Transport special constables, but we can go back and seek that out. But I can definitively say those activities are not undertaken by the Ottawa Police.
Okay, I see the chief has his hand up. Maybe he has something further to add to that. I'd certainly be interested if he does.
Sorry, Vice Chair, my hand's up for something else, so I'll just wait for this matter to be resolved.
Okay, well, Deputy Bell, if you're saying that there would be some way, as I said, this was an issue that was raised specifically by the public about special constables being used for instances of fare evasion. And that's what I'm wondering, if it doesn't seem like it's a major issue, but it was something that some of the public at least was concerned about, that this was some sort of major activity that special constables were doing. By the sounds of what you're saying, it is not, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And we will go and verify that with OC Transport, and we'll bring that information back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Smallwood. Received on the report? Received? Okay, so that concludes our public agenda. The chief seems to have some other business. Chief, over to you.
Chair, thank you. Very briefly, just wanted to again join you in recognizing Member Johnson's efforts to provide support to frontline vaccine operations. We're grateful for that demonstration of the board's commitment to community service. Our own members themselves have been well served by that process as they've received at least first round for frontline members, their vaccinations. So thank you. Chair, I also want to recognize, and you touched on it in your comments, but let me touch on it explicitly here in mine. We've had to call on the efforts of the leadership of this command team and many of our senior leadership team in making quick adjustments around a decision that was announced last week, and your own announcement today of the search for a new CAO. I want to recognize Deputy Chief Steve Bell putting up his hand to step into that vacated role. Acting Deputy Chief Mark Ford putting up his hand to step into the vacated role by Steve, and Acting Deputy Chief Joan McKenna as well for her ongoing support. This has been a whole of organization effort in every aspect of what's been presented here today, but I do want to recognize the efforts of this command team and its ongoing commitment to not only stabilizing the ship in very rough waters, but charting new courses and redesigning that ship as we go through those same rough waters. So I appreciate the board's support, yours and particularly the boards in general, through these difficult times. And we'll continue to do our best in regards to the board and regards to the community we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Slowly. And we certainly recognize that any decision that is taken always has a domino effect, and we appreciate that the senior command has come together to assist through this. And as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we are making earnest efforts to find a new CAO as quickly as is reasonably possible, bearing in mind that getting the right candidate and the right fit is hugely important. So thank you for those comments, Chief. Is there any other business? Seeing none, this concludes our public agenda. Our in-camera items will include the following: Labor Relations Unit Report, first quarter 2021, Labor Relations Matter is item number 2. Item number 3 is Legal Services Report, Settlements, first quarter 2021. Item number 4 is Executive Succession Management Program Annual Report. Item number 5 is Update on Collective Bargaining. Item number 6 is a legal matter. And item number 7 is a delay application. Our next regular public meeting will take place on Monday, May 31st. Please note the new start time at noon as we continue to test out different times moving forward. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So do.
Thank you, Member Nerman. Carried?
Carried.
Okay, we've been asked to have a short health break, so I would propose that the in-camera sessions start at 5:25. So we'll see you all then. Thank you.